Hello. So, before we get started with the introductions, before I say welcome to the podcast, this is officially non podcast time. I have to hear from the chat. I have to hear from all 80 of you who've tuned in already to the first minute of this show. Can you hear me on this microphone? I would apologize for starting this stream 15 minutes late, but I've been really struggling with getting this microphone calibrated to Linux OBS. This is the problem with moving around. I had a whole Windows tower just for streaming, and now I'm stuck doing it off of a laptop, and a laptop that is notorious for not being particularly reliable with this streaming stuff. So if anyone can just toss me, is it too loud? Is the balance off of my topping? Uh, okay, I mean, yeah, and this is the new Shure microphone, I guess. This is where all your super chat money went to. Hopefully, it sounds reasonably good. It certainly is more convenient. I don't have to hold the. This is the old one right here. This is what lasted me for the last. What was it? How long have I been doing this? This is 2024. I've been doing this for 8 years. I've been doing this for as long as I've known my wife, and I've been doing it on this stupid Blue Yeti. But this has now gone the way that maybe I should like auction this off on eBay or something. Microphone of an 8-year podcasting career right here. Just so you guys know, this is where it all began. But hopefully this sound is a lot crisper and we're not going to have all the technical difficulties of constantly having that thing cut out or not being able to magnify the sound properly or having some other problem. I mean, most of the problems are probably software related. Most of them are probably because Linux OBS, despite the fact that it is open source, seems perennially to be behind in updates from the Windows version, or at least the compatibility with other Linux sound software is less supported, which again is highly ironic, but there you go. So hopefully this sound setup is awesome, and I'm getting the money that you helped me pay for with your generous donations and super chats, and we'll discuss about another opportunity for donations later in the evening. But since everyone is texting me that they can hear me indeed, I will begin with this podcast. So, welcome to Fiddler's Green podcast number 4. I guess this is official. Welcome to Fiddler's Green podcast number 52, The New Slang. The New Slang is a reference to a very popular, well, it was sort of this insufferable movie that came out when I was in college. I think this was one of my first 2 years in college. There is this insufferably bad movie that came out called Garden State. It was this is you know how I know it's so bad? I know the first name of the director and lead star, but I don't know the last name. I know his name was Zach something something, and I know he was Jewish, but I don't know anything else about him, and I don't know his last name at all. All I know is he's a Jewish guy called Zach. He had starred in a TV show called Scrubs. And both Scrubs and the movie Garden State were just the most insufferable hipster pablum you could imagine. I don't know. Maybe I'm going to insult people's favorite movies here. Maybe I'm really kind of digging in to the millennial hipster sensibilities of 2003, 4. I can't exactly place the movie, but it was just. It felt like this guy was somebody's son in Hollywood who'd just been given a movie. The script didn't really make sense. It was carried by the fact that Natalie Portman, let's be honest, she's an incredibly cute actress, right? You know, I have always this dream that people will like more interesting faces. And Natalie Portman does not have a very interesting face. So, for instance, around the same time, that another popular pop star was Regina Spektor, who I absolutely adore. And Regina Spektor is actually a very symmetrical face, but her face looks very. Let's just say this: she is of the same ethnicity as Natalie Portman. Natalie Portman being Jewish Israeli, but Regina Spektor has distinctly less polished and less Hollywood features. She looks like she may not have gotten corrective surgery. And for that reason, I thought Regina Spektor was always much better looking, because I like people who have symmetrical, good-looking features, but also highly unusual ones. And Natalie Portman looks like she was essentially cloned. Despite the fact that she has ethnic roots in Israel, she looks like she just crawled out of a Hollywood flesh vat. Her face looks identical to every other Hollywood actress, except she's a little more neotinous in her features. And because of that, everyone remembers her performance in Garden State because it was super cute. It was super cute. And that, I should say, and the other thing that people remember was the soundtrack of Garden State, which was really cruel. It was kind of cruelly ironic that such a horrible movie had such a seminal soundtrack. And I discovered, I think, about like 4 bands off that soundtrack that were really, kind of cool indie bands of the early 2000s. Most of them were from the late 90s or earlier. And the one that I really liked the most was the Shins. Now, the Shins were, I know I'm going on long digressions here, but I'm just testing out the microphone. This is all going somewhere. I'm leading into my main bit. But the Shins were a band that was in the mode of all early 2000s bands like the Strokes and the White Stripes, a sort of retro indie band. They self-consciously set out to sound like music from earlier eras. Specifically, for the Stripes, for the White Stripes and the Strokes, that sound was kind of like early 70s rock, kind of just coming off of Led Zeppelin type deal, the very raw rock sound that was kind of a refreshing answer to the pop phenomenon that had gone on in the late '90s, or the rap rock stuff like Linkin Park and whatnot, Limp Bizkit. Remember those guys? And for the Shins, their entire aesthetic was. It wasn't even retro. It was retro, and the retro was early '60s, or mid '60s, I should say, mid to late '60s. But the Shins had seemed to design their entire band concept around not just duplicating the style of one band, that would be the Beach Boys, but one album from one band, the Beach Boys' seminal album, Pet Sounds. Pet Sounds was the Beach Boys' attempt to defy their own musical genre. They felt that they had been shoehorned into a concept of themselves where they could only sing about surfing and girls and hanging out on the beach and all sorts of trivial stuff. So the lead singer of the Beach Boys, was it Brian Wilson? I think that was his name. Decided that he really wanted to do a deep cut, and he did Pet Sounds. And it's an amazing album. If people don't know it, they should listen to it. It's not the deepest album by modern day standards, but for the Beach Boys, it was them pouring out their hearts in an artistic way that people didn't really associate with big rock bands like that were not experimental. And so the Shins' entire project was just, let's take the mood of Pet Sounds and design our entire band around it. And so we'll just continuously release albums that are like Pet Sounds style rock. And it actually really worked. I can, in fact, listen to an entire band of just a rock band based around Pet Sounds. It's kind of ironic that I mentioned Regina Spektor and the Shins in the same sentence, because I don't see a lot of music, and I haven't for the last 15 a lot of live music, that is. I haven't seen it for the last 15 years. But when I first met my wife the first year, for my birthday, I got tickets to A Prairie Home Companion, and they just happened. This is like the most blue state thing ever. I got tickets to Prairie Home Companion, and my two favorite indie bands were playing, and those were Regina Spektor and the Shins, like two insufferably hipsterish singer-songwriter pairs. But it was a fun time. But anyway, I should go with this, because the point of this podcast, or at least the hook that I wanted to kick off on, was a discussion of Matt Walsh's "Am I a Racist?" And I can't help but associate it with the Shins a little bit, because there is sort of a shadow hanging over Matt Walsh's project. So I'll fill people in for people who don't necessarily have their ear to the ground in terms of movies that are coming either from the Daily Wire or from Hollywood or are playing in the theaters. And I certainly can't blame you at this stage, since it's all 100% just dreck. It's just absolute dross being cast off from the production companies, and also from the Daily Wire, which seems to just want to do an earlier iteration of what Hollywood was doing. So in true enough form, they decide to do something that Hollywood hasn't done in a while, but that was really popular about 20 years ago, which was the mockumentary. So this is coming off the heels of Matt Walsh's previous success smash hit, What is a Woman? What is a Woman was, I think it was a much more sincere movie, where Matt Walsh actually tries to engage dialectically with the with various people who are in the trans movement, and then I think this is about 3 years ago, and at that point, the dialectic, people talking to each other, was still more or less a thing. It was more or less happening. We weren't really at the stage where everyone was just the doors were locked and the gates were bartered and the guards were up. And so Matt Walsh's attempt to just engage with trans activists, asking simple questions and getting very evasive answers on camera, it really worked well for an entertainment product. And for the most part, Matt Walsh is playing it straight. And of course, I think this, fast forward to 2023, fast forward to 2024, and it's really obvious that you can't just walk up to progressives and ask them questions. So in the true form of the Daily Wire productions, they decide to borrow a different format of the documentary, which is the ambush documentary, or the mockumentary. Again, this is something that comes from the early 2000s. I remember listening to the Shins, driving up to an internship in Seattle, and taking with me a CD. We used to download these things from like LimeWire or something, and put them on CDs, and then I could watch them on my laptop, or it was like maybe it was DVDs then, I can't remember. I used to watch them on my laptop. You like literally put the disc in the laptop and watch your pirated copies of the shows that you want to watch that are almost all comedies. And at this time, I think this is around 2003, 2004. This is, yeah, I can't get the exact year right, but this was just at the high point of this kind of ambush mockumentary. The same one that Matt Walsh tries to do in I Am a Racist. So in Matt Walsh's I Am a Racist, he goes into interactions with people pretending to be someone else, pretending to be a true believer, and then he kind of plays along with a bit and gets them to humiliate themselves. And the I was never really a big fan of this ambush documentary. I think the most popular show on television at the time that was doing this in America was a show called Punked by Ashton Kutcher, and my friend was really into it. He loved this show, and he gave me this CD of like comedy, and I'm like, okay, a lot of this is going to be punked. And I'm like, this is absolutely cringe. This is like a more mean-spirited version of Smile, You're on Candid Camera. This is this absolute shit. But then I kind of clicked over the folder when I was away going through this. I was in a hotel room on a trip, going looking for something to entertain me, and I saw another folder called The Ali G Show, and I started watching it. There are few times in my life where I almost split my side laughing. I can kind of count them on a few hands. There's a few times when you're a kid, obviously. I remember when I was in high school, there were a few episodes of the show, and again, I'm outing myself as a horrible millennial here, but there were a few episodes of the show Mystery Science Theater 3000. In particular, the ones where they review Manos Hands of Fate, where I remember almost not being able to breathe. I was laughing so hard. But my first time watching the Ali G show was one of those times. I started laughing and I could not stop laughing. So again, I'll back up, and this is obviously the model for Matt Walsh's "Am I a Racist?" coming now almost 20 years after the Ali G show finished its last run. But it's a British show by, I mean, I think people all know this person now. It's by a Sephardic Jew. I think as I don't know exactly, he's an English citizen, but I think he is also dual citizen of Israel too. But he's a Sephardic Jew by the name of Sacha Baron Cohen. And his concept in this show was to essentially personify three different characters and ambush people in awkward interviews. Now, the again, I apologize if you know this already, and certainly this guy has seen more mainstream success. But I'm going to try to explain what the Ology show was in 2003, 2004, 2005, so that there's some context to what this was and why I think it suddenly stopped working so well, which is obviously the cut-in to Matt Walsh's movie. Um, so the concept again was Sacha Baron Cohen. He's this big lanky guy sort of racially ambiguous too. He has kind of this. He's a very fine-tuned, very light olive skin, of which he could be a Southern European, or if he didn't get a lot of sun, he could swing Central European very well too. Or and if you met him, you might just think, okay, he's some nondescript Caucasianoid person. It's very hard to place him ethnically. So he went as these three characters. So the first one was Ali G, who was a sort of a rap personality, a hip hop personality, supposedly from England. And this is the main character of the show. Now, it is incredibly obvious in the original run of the Ali G show that Sacha Baron Cohen is specifically making fun of Pakistani men who adopt African American customs, but who are not African American. Hence, Ali G, which is a Muslim name. This is obviously a parody of a Muslim immigrant to the United Kingdom who adopts hip hop norms from America. That was the point of the show. Of course, later on, when he realizes that he could be impersonating somebody who is not white, shock horror. The Sacha Baron Cohen kind of ate his words and said, "Oh, no, 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 no! It's not Ali G as in Ali, the Muslim caliph. It's Ali G as short for Alistair. This guy's a British dude." Even though Sacha Baron Cohen can absolutely not. I mean, I could believe he's Lebanese. I could believe he's Kazakhstani. I could even believe he is a very swarthy Central European like myself. I cannot believe for a second that he is an Anglo-Saxon. He does not look like an Anglo-Saxon. He does not look like a Northern European. But nevertheless, the race angle does not really come up in the Ali G show because the joke of Ali G is that he's incredibly stupid and ignorant. He goes around and interviews people and doesn't have the command over anything. So he goes to the UN and interviews people in the UN, and he asks why they gave Michael Jordan his own seat at the table, even though because they have the country Jordan represented. Or he talks to a bunch of doctors, and he confuses the homeopathic doctor he calls the homophobic doctor. And he carries in every time they try to correct him, he just misunderstands more, so that they sound incredibly stupid trying to explain basic things to him, basic ideas, basic concepts. And so the weird thing about Ali G is the main star of the show because with this character Ali G, Sacha Baron Cohen is able to interview any number of people that are really highly positioned in the government. He interviews Noam Chomsky, he interviews Gore Vidal, he interviews half the cabinet in the Bush administration. He interviews a lot of government officials who aren't prepared, or senators, big name people. He interviews Patrick Buchanan, all of these things. And every time he has panels too. He has panels of Harvard educated doctors. And it's this utter idiot asking a doctor why, if he believes in euthanasia, and then saying, well, do the youth always have to be in Asia, or can the youth be in Europe or America too? And, stupid questions like that. And, all of these people that you can feel the talent burning in front of you. All of these doctors, all of these professors, all of these politicians have carved out hours of their time to be on this guy's show. And he can't hardly string a sentence together. And on all the while, the pretense is this guy's like a hip hop personality. And so he keeps it going like he's just hip with the kids. This is just how kids talk these days. Fair enough. The second the second personality that Sacha Baron Cohen did in the Ali G show was, everyone's going to know this character. This is what made him famous later on in the movie, a character called Borat, who is, he's supposedly from Kazakhstan or some ex-Soviet republic, although Kazakhstanians don't look particularly Caucasian the way that Sacha Baron Cohen does. And I think Steve Saylor got this right, is that Sacha Baron Cohen was really trying to reinvent the Polish joke. There's only one joke about Borat, and that Borat is from a backwards culture. So as opposed to Ali G, who interviews bigwigs and people who are very important and very, very learned and act stupid, Borat tries to interview ordinary Americans to try to learn about America and acts horrifically culturally insensitive. So he'll go to a judo lesson and he'll ask the instructor, what's the best move to silence a woman? And to put them in these positions that they're unable to really answer properly. And then the last character that Sacha Baron Cohen has on his show is Bruno, who is this effeminate gay Austrian dude, of which, again, I think Sacha Baron Cohen's sort of stretching his ability to imitate people. It's kind of obvious that he doesn't have a very Austrian face. I know a lot of Jewish people who have very Germanic looking features, and Sacha Baron Cohen is not one of them. But he pulls it off with enough affectation. And in Bruno's case, the joke is really about how almost everyone thinks that the way gay people behave is irritating, but no one can say it. And how gay culture is superficial and idiotic, and no one wants to catch it out. So he'll come up to celebrities, and Bruno does more of the fashion scene. He'll ask, like, who should we execute for being out of fashion this year, and they'll just play along with the gag as it goes on. They'll never realize that this is. Um, that this is horrific. What they're being asked to do. They kind of go along with the extremism of the moment because he has a camera and he looks like the right person in the right place. So it's kind of odd because only a few months after I just split my side watching every episode of this show, I realized that this type of humor had an expiration date on it. This is part of a particular time and place, and it just can't work very well. And what's sort of funny is that Sacha Baron Cohen's star kept on rising as his bit began to predictably break down. So, very famously, I think in 2006, he releases the Borat movie, which again rocketed him to stardom. But the problem with the Borat movie is that by the time Borat comes out, everyone in power or in media knows Sacha Baron Cohen. He's a known quantity, and so he can't get interviews with people who are. I mean, they'll know it's a gag. They'll know it's a gag. They'll know that there's a joke here, and so Borat has to essentially has to interview ordinary Americans and try to put them in similarly awkward positions, specifically Americans largely from red states and in more rural areas and poor communities where they're not going to be hip to an already popular comedy show and the fact that they're being punked as they speak. And of course, this allows him to play off his favorite topic, which is that the Borat character, being Kazakhstani, really he's a stand-in for Slavs, which were traditionally, the arch enemy of Jews in the early 20th century, and probably the origin of the infamous Polish joke in American comedy. And he also looks more convincingly Slavic than he does Kazakhstani. But Borat's this horrible anti-Semite, and so he just drops anti-Semitism into every sentence. And the people who's interviewing don't know what to make of it, so they just kind of smile and nod. Um, the the problem with the Borat movies, and there's another one had to do. There was another Bruno movie that was notably less successful that Cohen produced, I think about 4 years after, or maybe it was like 3 years after the Borat movie. By that time, the bit had completely gotten old. And no one was falling for it anymore. And Bruno's shtick didn't even work very well because Bruno's shtick was to do people from the fashion industry. And everyone in the fashion industry knew who Sacha Baron Cohen was, and they knew who the character of Bruno was, and they weren't going to line up to have themselves be humiliated by this anymore. And okay, you can say, okay, well, this is what I mean when I say that the comedy bit has a lifespan. What I mean by that is that people will eventually catch on to the character, but that's not actually what I mean when I say that it has a lifespan to it. I mean, obviously, people will catch on to the bit. It's live comedy, it's ambush comedy. You can't run that shit forever. But what I really mean when I say you can't run this bit forever is that uh, people thought that the Borat movie was very meaningful. People felt that it exposed something critical about the American character because Borat was this incredibly racist character, and everyone else sort of played along with it. Everyone else kind of let him do like they let him continue on his anti-Semitic tirades. They let him go on about his ignorant and backwards views on women. They let him talk about abusing his wife and wanting to rape people. And then, they always nodded along, regardless of what insane thing he did. And the idea, I mean, what people were, the way that in particular progressives were trying to spin this in 2006 was that this was exposing the hate of America. This was sort of exposing the bourgeoisie sensibilities of America. And this is, Americans see racism like this every day and they don't say anything. They just nod along. They aren't calling this out. I mean, what's the appropriate reaction to this? Well, I mean, the appropriate reaction, if anyone else said this, if someone came up to me and talked to me about how I mean, am I going to get banned? I can't even repeat the things that Borat says about Jewish people or about women for fear of getting banned by YouTube. But you get the idea. I mean, he compares them to insects and talks about violence that he wants to perpetrate against them. I mean, if anyone said that to me in my ordinary life, I would react very negatively. But the problem is, and the conceit of the show is kind of weird, is that you don't say it to Borat because of who Borat is. And that was sort of the problem with all of Sacha Baron Cohen's characters, is that he was kind of producing a magic trick. I mean, first of all, he was kind of punking civilization itself. Civilization is built around an idea that there is an unspoken regulation in what people do and what people say in public, and how people push back, and how people are polite, and how you treat people who aren't exactly like you. So the only reason why it works is that people were in on where people were essentially in a society. We live in a society. The comedy show that was a key part of the appeal. But the second part of the appeal, is that well, I mean, I should say the reason, not obviously the appeal is that people are making fun of themselves, or people are making fools of themselves. But the reason why it works so particularly well for Sacha Baron Cohen is that each of his three characters has some kind of quality about them that makes people reluctant to criticize them. In the case of Ali G, they think he's a minority, and they think that he is some kind of hip hop personality that's affecting African American attitudes. And so, ordinarily, if you were to meet someone like Ali G on the street, your normal reaction, if you just did not, if you wanted to be sincere and weren't caught up in being polite like most civilized people are, your first reaction would be to call him an effing idiot, because he's an idiot. He's an absolute moron. But the problem is that Sacha Baron Cohen specifically dressed Ali G to look like a Pakistani or an African American. I mean, obviously he had a British accent, so he couldn't have been an African American. But either a mulatto or a Pakistani, someone who's not quite white, and certainly affecting a not white culture. And what's the one thing that no one will ever call those groups out for being? It's being lower intelligence. That's the exact reaction. So he anticipated the problem, and then sort of put his costume in front of that. And for that reason, he could keep the bit going for longer than you could ever do in any other circumstance. For Borat, what is Borat's anti-Semitic and misogynistic? Well, Borat also ostensibly comes from a Muslim country. And in 2004, 2005, 2006, what's the one thing you're not supposed to be? Is Islamophobic. Bruno, what's Bruno's problem? Bruno is irritating and no one wants to put up with him. He's incredibly, incredibly grating. But nobody could admit, no one wanted to admit, that gay people were incredibly irritating. And so the funny thing about Sacha Baron Cohen's bit is that for all this ostensible punking of normal Americans and the way normal Americans do things, the show runs on liberal pieties. That's the only way it works. And the only way he's able to push the shtick as far as he does is he's able to count on the fact that his victims the people he's pranking will entertain those liberal pieties. And of course, by the time Bruno comes around, it's kind of run its course. And furthermore, I mean, additionally, what was so ironic about this was that Sacha Baron Cohen was at the front of the whole wokeification of comedy, right out in front, coming out against edgy humor, anti-Semitic humor, in the wake of the 2014 to 2000, or I should say it's more like 2012 to 2020 Great Awakening. And everyone pointed this out at the time. I mean, this guy was a guy that got rich pretending to be racist in front of people, and saying horrifically racist things and horrifically sexist things, and in some ways doing blackface. I mean, if we're honest, that's what Ology was blackface. Sacha Baron Cohen is the last person who successfully did blackface, and Hollywood lapped it up. They lapped up every last little bit of it because it flattered their ideological preconceptions. This is, and of course, Sacha Baron Cohen attempts to do this again in fictionalized form. It never works as well, obviously, because it's not suited for the time we live in now. He tried to do a parody of Gaddafi a year after, like right the year, I think it was the year Gaddafi was killed. In fact, it was horribly bad taste as Libya descends into a civil war that kills millions of people. You got this guy like spiking the football on the complete disillusionment of Middle Eastern Muslim societies and the descent into chaos and war. So I mean, you have this memory of Sacha Baron Cohen as just being this completely disgusting individual. I mean, he wants people. It's degrading humor. I mean, it's one of the shows that I laugh my ass off the most I can ever remember the first time I saw it. But it's just the most disgusting form of humor ever. You're making people laugh by forcibly degrading people, turning people's pieties and their attempts to be nice into ways to put them down and to get them to debase themselves on stage in a giant sideshow, and a giant sideshow that sort of runs by subverting the principles that you yourself believe in. But the thing was only really funny because it had that dimension. So enter Matt Walsh and the movie. Here we go. Do these slide things here. Okay, so this is. I mean, you can see my face is covering up the name on the poster, but I don't think anyone needs to be reminded of the title. This is the movie "Am I a Racist?" with Matt Walsh, a follow-up to his more previous, more successful, and better film "What Is a Woman?" And okay, I guess I'm gonna call spoiler alerts on this film right now. I can't talk about it without spoiling it for you. I don't really see very many movies, so it's amazing when I actually get a chance to go out to the theater. I feel like I should do a live stream just on this movie, and I guess I kind of am right now because I'm talking about it at length. But I'll break it down. I mean, it's a bad movie. I really don't think it's a good movie. But part of me wonders if I can say it's a bad movie because I absolutely laughed uncontrollably at one or two parts of it. Well, two moments. I'm not so sure two uncontrollable bouts of. I mean, my wife made fun of me. I was laughing like the Cape Fear Robert De Niro in the theater, or if you're a millennial, the sideshow Bob smoking the cigar in the theater, which is a parody of the Robert De Niro. I was that guy at these two moments in the film. I don't think that the movie is very good. It has a number of problems, and I guess I'll get into them later. The first one is that Matt Walsh he can't push the gag very far. He does actually a pretty good job of maintaining character. And there are a few moments, but the thing is, it's actually a little bit too honest. There are moments when he tries to do the Ali G thing, where he goes in with a false name and tries to be someone else into a community of people and then tries to get them to react to him being a dumbass. But that's by far the weakest point of the movie. First of all, they immediately see through him and they kick him out. And as you would, because the guy stands out like a sore thumb, and he's obviously trolling them. And it doesn't even really make much of a point either. I mean, what's the point? Oh, you got kicked out of an anti-racist struggle session that you signed up for with a false name. How surprising! Because they recognized one of the most recognizable conservative pundits in the entire world. Uh, the rest of the movie, which was a little bit more successful, was him essentially engaging with people more honestly. I guess this is when he dons the alias, and he I don't know. To me, he dressed up like Vosh or someone like some kind of. He basically has got a man bun and some kind of Portland style clothes, and then decided to cast himself as a progressive, and then go through all of the DEI stuff. The the I guess this sort of brings us to the two scenes that I found remarkably entertaining and remarkably hilarious, in spite of myself. Again, Matt Walsh's attempts to kind of lay up on the DEI industry are a little bit more. They're more honest. What's remarkable is that he's much more honest about how he goes about doing this than Sacha Baron Cohen is. Matt Walsh isn't hiding behind an identity that the people at have a difficult time critiquing. And if he really wanted to do the full Sacha Baron Cohen, they would have had a black guy do the exact same thing and try to push the envelope even further. And I think you could have gone further with that, although you would have kind of opened up some different avenues for you there. So at some point, it feels like in classic conservative fashion, this is the Daily Wire people trying to copy the Hollywood of 20 years ago with less skill and less aptness and less focus, and then being surprised when it gets a worse product. There is, however, one thing that they do better than Ali G, and this is something that Ali G really rarely does, or any of the characters that Ali G or Borat or Sacha Baron Cohen. They very rarely, they every now and again they do this with ordinary people, like people that you never heard of. That that they'll just let them talk, and then they'll say something that's horrible to this fake character that's on camera. That happens every now and again. And whenever that happened in Borat or Ali G, they would like pull a flex, and that would be the pivotal moment of the movie when somebody organically came up to them and said something racist. That would be the snapshot moment of the entire film. But first of all, that rarely happened, and that never happened with any of their celebrity guests on the Ali G show, or even any of the movies that spun off from it. The strongest point for Matt Walsh is he actually does go to the celebrities in question. He actually does go to all of these anti-racist coordinators, Syra Rao, Robin DiAngelo, a variety of people who kind of benefited from the hate crimes industry, and he just lets them go on. He just kind of lets them do their shtick, and does some interjection on the side to kind of highlight it. He takes it a little bit too far. In one of them, he has a race to dinner where he's a clumsy waiter, and he continuously drops plates and spills things on people, and is extra irritating. And I thought that was actually kind of the perfect dynamic, obviously, because he could not race to dinner, because race to dinner is exclusively an event for white women, of course, because it's a con, and anyone else would call them out on it. And Matt Walsh has some problems. First of all, he in several of these instances he pushes it a little too far. He kind of breaks character a little bit too much, to the point where almost everyone in the scene probably realizes that he's trolling him. When it would have been really much more powerful if he had just been a clumsy waiter making a fool out of himself. While I talked about how all white men are evil oppressors who are like the monopoly man, that would have been much more poignant. I would have thought there also was an instant where he's having this interaction with the this person at a bookstore, and there's a book on the shelf in the anti-racism section that's literally titled the N-word, spelled out, right? And he missed such an opportunity to have an extended who's on first routine with that person with the name of the book, because he calls them up later on over the phone and tries to get the title of that book. They really could have set that up a bit better as a who's on first routine. They missed that opportunity as well. But the moment that I genuinely laughed, I guess two moments are the first one was when he actually interviewed Robin DiAngelo. And this was a phenomenal piece of filmmaking. It was only like 5 minutes, but it almost justified the entire movie. which is otherwise like a worse version of the Ollie G show because it's not very funny other than those two scenes. And maybe there's a third scene that's a little bit funny too, where he reenacts the Jesse Smollett mugging. But in the scene, and I really hate Robin DiAngelo. She's a fellow alumnus of one of the former schools I attended, and she's this total grifter. And Matt Walsh just lets her talk and suggests things to her that are crazy, and she just runs with it. She just runs with this manifest insanity that's on display in the scenes. And so, I mean, I guess I already gave you the spoiler alert, but I guess Robin. So the thing he suggests is that they all take all the money that is in their wallet and give it to his cameraman, who's African American, as reparations. And the line is that the line of the progressives is that this isn't about just giving any random people money. This isn't just about handing random black people money. This is about actually fixing the system. That's what reparations is about. And of course, Robin DiAngelo is at the forefront of this. And Matt Walsh shows that no, like the crude way that conservatives conceive of reparations talk, that is actually what these people believe. I mean, they don't actually believe any of this. I should make that very clear. Robin DiAngelo is a grifter. She doesn't believe any of this. She believes in money, and she's made herself very, very rich doing this. But if someone comes to them and they say a manifestly ridiculous thing that is the conservative parody of the DEI stuff, and they say it in the right cadence and with the cameras on them and in the right way, the progressive will just go along with the nonsense. He will go along with the kayfabe for as long as it takes in order to get the proper, to be on the right side of the conversation, to be on the compassionate side of the conversation. I think this is probably one of the. I mean, I don't think Ali G ever got a win like this against an actual celebrity, where they expose sort of the falseness of their own premise. And I think this is kind of additionally delicious. Well, I'll go into that a little bit later. But the second one, I think, the second laugh out loud moment was when Matt Walsh organically hosts his own anti-racism workshop, and he instructs people on the right amount of smiling to give people of color, and has them practice smiling at each other in non-racist ways, and then wheels up somebody who he says is his racist uncle, and then they literally have this struggle session. It was literally a reenactment of the Maoist struggle sessions, where all like I think it was like two or three of the women just start cussing out this guy that Matt Walsh tells them. He just tells them this guy is racist, and then they immediately react by piling on and going after this effigy of racism. And my wife turned to me and she said at this point, isn't it weird that the people who are always hopping on the most ridiculous outrages, the people who are the most willing to just explode in anger over a concept that they don't even really understand, they're all women? Why is that? I kind of chuckled to myself. How deep do you want to go on this, honey? I don't want to ruin date night. Although maybe Matt Walsh already has. The thing is that this is kind of getting to the what's ultimately futile. I mean, the first problem with movies is not funny. I told you the two funny parts, the two or three funny parts in the movie. I'm sorry, I spoiled it for you. So there's three funny parts in this movie. That's the first problem. There's a ridiculous, like, neoconservative message, like, I want to be judged by the content of my character, not by the color of my skin. Haha, I follow Dr. Martin Luther King. Don't you know Martin Luther King was against affirmative action? Checkmate, progressives. Checkmate. Checkmate, Al Sharpton. Martin Luther King. You know, the guy that you used to march with? He was against affirmative action. Of course he wasn't. Martin Luther King was for affirmative action. He was not a colorblind personality. And those speeches that all the conservatives love to cite, literally not written by Martin Luther King, written by his communist fellow travelers. Nobody actually believed that this is what's going to come. I mean, I guess a lot of well-meaning middle-class white people did believe that we were just going to abolish Jim Crow and then America would become integrated. I mean, maybe some progressive activists believed that as well. But this was part of a more radical project to transform the country at a fundamental level in a fundamentally progressive way. And that's what the real crime of this movie is that it doesn't have an audience. When What Is a Woman came out, I remember, I didn't actually send this to people, but I mean, I talked to some family members who were more conservative, and I suggested that they send this to family members that they were closer to because it was a good olive branch. Like it was genuinely something that a progressive could see and kind of understand something new. Maybe it was somehow more shocking and more basic because it was genuine dialogue, whereas this was all staged and done under false pretenses for the most part. The problem with this movie is that there is no audience for it. Sure, Robin DiAngelo and a variety of other people demonstrate that they're grifters. I could tell he couldn't get Ta-Nehisi Coates or Ibrahim X. Kendi. Everyone already knows that these people are grifters. I mean, Ibrahim X. Kendi's career fell apart last year, and his star will never rise again. Ta-Nehisi Coates is trying to make a comeback, which I think will be ultimately unsuccessful. The gas has run out on this particular form of wokeness. Everyone realizes it's ridiculous. No one wants to defend it anymore. It's no longer fun. And progressives are already admitting this. On the other hand, they're admitting this because the goal of this kind of rhetoric has been achieved. Just like the goal of Martin Luther King was essentially to recreate a more radical version of America. The goal of DEI was to advance certain perspectives and institutionalize them. Once they're institutionalized, they become the way things are. They do not need to be put under a microscope anymore. They don't, these ideas are already internalized by all good right thinking people, and their slogans are internalized in funded organizations. So I guess I kind of am semi doxing myself when I say that I currently live in Victoria, British Columbia. Now, Victoria, British Columbia is my wife's semi hometown. This is where we met. And to get to the movie theater, we have to walk past the cathedral, which is, it's on and off our parish. Sometimes we go there, sometimes we go to a different place. We haven't really found a parish that we like yet. And I walk past the church. This was my wife's church for a very, very long time, a cathedral. You can still see some of the remnants of the vandalism that was perpetrated in the, what was it, the summer of 2021, surrounding the hoax of the residential school graves. Nothing was ever found, and they burnt a variety of churches. There's actually a church that got burned down just today that happened, and this is. And I don't think it's any accident either, because this is Indigenous Peoples Day. This is the day of reconciliation. And so my son had no school. And the school, which is, it's a Christian private school, is going all in on this reconciliation angle. It's really making me reconsider this path for education, which I thought would be more or less safe because it was religious. But it's 100% taken over. They have all the kids wearing orange, which is the color, I don't know why. It used to be the color of Protestantism. Now it's the color of reconciliation. And they give the kids the day off today, which adds complications for some people who work from home. And it's internalized. So we walk past our church. It's vandalized from violence done in 2021 on hoax. And the rest of the front steps are covered with the refuge of fentanyl addicts that have been camped out there. They're not there currently, but the whole steps are just covered in trash, covered in insane amounts of absolutely disgusting refuse. And I'm like, oh well, how can you object to the poor being on the steps of the church? Well, I object because they're not getting help. The government of Canada is encouraging people to kill themselves with fentanyl. We have the funding to have these people in institutions and not kill themselves and deface public property at the same time. So we walk past my own church, defaced and covered in shit. The movie theater is only a few blocks away from where we park. We cross over the street and go to the movie theater. And in front of the movie theater, right to the right side of it, is another ancient Victorian building. It's not actually Victorian. I think it came from probably the 50s, but it's an old government building. And it's been reconverted to be the Center for Indigenous Justice. The entire building, this is a huge Victorian building. It's permanently just the Center for Indigenous Justice, right in the center of Victoria. Boom. And it's not the only one. There are many, 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 many centers of Indigenous justice, centers for truth and reconciliation. And you walk out of the movie theater and you're like, okay, well, who is this movie for? What message is it trying to send? Who am I going to send this movie to communicate to them some message that they can take? Nobody. The progressives know it's a fraud, and to the extent that it exists, it's everywhere. It's in the institutions. It's everywhere. And then we go to bed, we get up, we go to church the next day. And this is where it kind of ultimately dawns on me. This is where the other foot kind of drops, is that, first of all, the church is crowded. It's crowded because this city, along with most cities in British Columbia, have massively increased their populations in the last 4 years. And so now the whole church is overflowing with new families that come in from Catholic countries. I'm not upset that they're worshiping. Certainly that's the best thing they could be doing. And if you're local, the more the merrier. I guess we have to go to the standing room only, which is its own deal, right? We're off in the corner when used to be there could be a seat up front. I mean, and of course you can just tell that the priests are sitting there going, "We're doing such a good job. We're doing such a good job billing. The church hasn't been this full since 1973 or something like that. We haven't had to use the choir law for general seating since the 80s. You can tell that there's a variety of leaders saying that. No, dude, your mission is to spread the faith among your flock, which is not what is happening. The people, the native Canadians that were here in the 80s have largely stopped going to your church because they all became agnostics and atheists and were colonized by the progressive successor religion. You have failed in that mission. Your adoption of these new Catholics, which is absolutely your responsibility to serve them spiritually wherever they may be, even if they shouldn't be in the country, technically speaking. It is not the church's job to interfere with that. It's not the church's job not to serve those people if they happen to be here, even for reasons that are not themselves legitimate. But you can't pat yourselves on the back for that. You have not actually accomplished growth. You have just imported somebody else's Catholics. The total number of Catholics, the total percentage of Catholicism of the human race has not gone up under your laws. It's gone down. You are artificially inflating your own parish by importing more devout people from other countries. That is not a mission win in anybody. It should not be a mission win in anybody's book. That is the equivalent. That is the pastoral equivalent of money printing, believer printing. We don't need to actually preach to the people who live here. All we need to do is take people from more devout countries and bring them in, and then presto changeo, we have a thriving parish. I mean, thriving to a certain extent. And then you're like, okay, well, the attitude for "am I racist?" I think coming out of it was, well, maybe this piece of fiction is just closing it's too late. The Great Awakening is already over. Now we are in sort of a motion of putting the woke away. The pendulum is swinging back. But is it? Because on this Sunday, the homily, the gospel reading, was Luke chapter 4, verse 25. The paraphrase is Jesus says to the disciples, so, Let none of you keep the little children from me, and whoever keepeth the children of me should have a millstone put around his neck and tossed into the ocean. Powerful passage. And I know that a variety of people in our circles have become perhaps too fond of using millstone symbolism in their uh, Twitter personalities. And it can be funny. I tend to not like using allusions to violence, but when it comes in the form of a gospel quote, how bad can it be? So, our Monsignor, and I don't really want to. One of the reasons I'm very reluctant always to sort of draw knives over something that I heard in church, because that is sort of one of the red lines that I try to respect, is to never bring up politics inside the church, because I feel that A, I am not competent to question the church, but B, I also don't want politics is something that's fundamentally dirty. It needs to be kept outside of the church. But this homily was so bad, I feel like I almost have to mention it. The first part of the homily was dedicated to reminiscing about how he was on a cruise, which is like, of all the boomer things you could ever talk about, your latest cruise trip would have to be at the top of them, right? I don't think I've ever been on a cruise. It's like the most boomer thing imaginable. I know that like the town I'm living in, Victoria, is like, it's like a big cruise destination. Cruises stop. Any cruise that goes up and down the Pacific coast always stops here as its northernmost point. Or if you're doing some kind of like Alaska iceberg thing, this is where it starts. So this is a big cruise ship hub. So it's not so unusual that he was doing ministry there. And but it already sets the tone as being the ne plus ultra of boomerism. This priest on the cruise, and he talks about the crew, because he's along with the crew because he's one of the chaplains there, and he makes a special point calling out all of the different immigrant ethnicities that were part of this cruise crew. And they're literally like applause lines, like the Filipinos and the Filipino section claps, the Indian section claps. Like every single non-white ethnicity that was represented on this cruise ship staff like gets an applause line during the homily. I mean, like why are we applauding the fact that they're present, the fact that they're represented in this cruise line? Like what does this have to do with the gospel? The point of this was to show how all people work together so cohesively when they have a mission. And the mission is to be part of this cruise line. Well, I mean, I'm sorry, Father, but you are kind of paying these people. Not me, but some people might say that this is a little bit mercenary, that this model of multiculturalism depends on all these people getting paid by the cruise liner, which is supported by boomer dollars. And if there were rich boomers who weren't paying these people all to work together and be nice and serve them for a 1 month period, I know you were among them as the chaplain, then immediately this whole system would stop working. It is 100% funded on money. I'm a huge believer in multicultural communities working on with common faith. But a cruise liner going out of Victoria is not a faith community. We're not talking about a fellowship of Christian brotherhood. But this is the template about how we should all be working. If we could capture the same cohesion in this parish that we had on the cruise ship, that would be great. It's the Matt Walsh colorblindness, Martin Luther King. This is where Matt Walsh left him. Okay, fair enough. Like this is Matt Walsh is a Catholic. I'm a Catholic here, and this is I consider this the cringe message. But if that's where this priest is, I'm not hearing anything that I haven't heard before 1,000 times, even in conservative parishes in America. But then we get on, and the topic turns to, oh no, truth and reconciliation. So here we are for another turn. Because now we're no longer applauding the audience. Now all of a sudden, at first, the priest is sending an appreciation out to the various ethnic groups in the audience as they're represented. There's literally applause going around. But now it's judgment. Now it's, you are the problem. Of course not you're the problem. We're the problem. And the discussion immediately goes to a parish, a cathedral being sold to settle a lawsuit from the government having to do with child abuse. I think that this was child abuse that was done potentially in the wake of the residential schools in Canada. I'm not going to comment on the residential schools because I don't really have the information prepared. Obviously, the 2021 graves turned out to be, from what we can tell right now, a complete hoax. There were abuses communicated there, and to settle the abuses of these long dead priests, the Catholic Church had to sell billions of dollars of property effectively at bargain basement prices. And I guess, God willing, a Catholic philanthropist brought them up, but then rented them back to the church. And he framed this as the rent we have to pay for the properties that should rightly belong to the church. And by we pay it, obviously he means the parishioners pay it, because that's where the money comes from. This is right and just reconciliation for the past crimes of the church. And so now all of a sudden we do believe in collective guilt and collective punishment. Again, I the idea that we're hearing here, and this is obviously framed back to Luke's gospel, that essentially this is the this is uh, the people, the church keeping children from Christ. That was the crime they committed, and the price we're paying now, both in repairing damages due to vandalism, church burnings, and apparently having to sell churches to pay back lawsuits against the church itself. This is our millstone that we have around our necks. So now we're no longer colorblind individualists. This is not Christianity. This is, I mean, and I don't think that the priest where he's doing that. This is current thingism wearing a gospel skin suit. No, none of this is organic to the gospel. And I told my wife, if the church is what it says it is, the idea of a state bringing suit against the church, especially bringing suit against the church for something that the state itself participated in, the residential schools, to my knowledge, were a state-sponsored project. If the church is actually the steward of Christ, the church of Christ, the holder of the sacraments, the idea that it can be sued as a corporate entity by elements of the state is insane. It's insane. And to even countenance this is sacrilegious. I wanted to say, you are literally selling the garments of Christ. I mean, I'll put it this way. And what maybe some Protestants are like, well, why is that? Why couldn't you sue the church as a corporal entity? Okay, so there's 3 or 4 possibilities. The first possibility is that these crimes never happened, which is, some crimes did happen, but some crimes obviously didn't. A lot of them have turned out to be hoaxes. So there's that possibility. The second possibility is that these crimes did happen and were commissioned by a member of the church, in which case the guilt lies with that member. It's in contravention of the church's teachings. I don't remember the church ever teaching about abusing children. So that probably, if crimes were committed, it was in contravention of the teaching, in which case the church should not be liable for the damages. The individual should be liable for the damages, or the government who sponsored the programs should be liable for the damages. The third possibility, which is supposedly impossible, is that these individuals committed these crimes under the instruction of the doctrine of the church, in which case the church has fallen into heresy and is no longer the church of Christ. Which one of those 3 possibilities is it? I'm pretty sure it's either option A or option B, in which case what we are doing is we are illegitimately stripping wealth from the church to pay the people, or to pay the bills, to pay the bail for the people who knowingly desecrated the church's reputation in public. Like I said to my wife, this is literally stripping the garments from Christ and selling them to get Judas's 30 pieces of silver. That's what we're paying reparations. We're not paying reparations for the church. The church cannot commit actions like this. We are paying reparations to the abusers of the church, the people who have harmed the church. And the idea that somehow, which is the implication of the tone, if not the implication of the words, the implication of the tone is that the parishioners themselves are participants in this great crime. Collectively speaking, as a corporal body, we are responsible for this. I can't stand this. I believe in truth and reconciliation. I deeply believe in truth and reconciliation. This is why it pisses me off so much. Maybe this is a particular Canadian thing as well. It pisses me off so much when I have to deal with counterfeit apologies. Apologies for crimes that they didn't commit, and insincere apologies that are superfluous social signaling. And I don't think the priest was genuinely contrite about some crime he committed. I don't think that was genuinely an emotion. I felt like he was going through the motions, that he was essentially signaling his favor for the current thing. Okay, great, Matt Walsh. You made a documentary where you got people to admit that they believe the current thing. Where does that leave us? Absolutely nowhere. I think this leads us pretty organically to where we are in this particular moment in 2024. We're in the middle of an election. The problem is that this election is not real. It's as real as the performative contrition of progressives when they flagellate themselves over crimes that they did not commit and say, I'm sorry 1,000 times, and pretend to pay reparations after collecting, thousands and thousands of dollars to enrich themselves at the behest of the state. This election is not happening. What is? I mean, there is a thing that is coming up. I mean, Morgoth says this in his essay. There is this event on the horizon called the U.S. election of 2024. And in the U.S. election in 2024, the government of the United States and the government of all Western countries is feeling like it might experience a black swan event and suddenly destabilize itself and not know how to reconstitute its power base in a way that's coherent on the world stage. The only way that it can get money is by continuously importing people into itself and borrowing against it. But native citizens in particular, are becoming increasingly aware that this effort to import millions of people every year is done to their ultimate detriment, to their long-term detriment in the increased prices of housing, and in the short-term detriment in the cases of crime, and I guess in the long term, the ultimate loss of their power demographically and culturally. The problem is that the system either stays up or it falls down. I guess there is sort of, a possibility that Donald Trump comes in and does the exact right thing and is able to simultaneously undercut the current trends inside the American government, while at the same time not totally destabilizing our financial system, so that it slowly bleeds out and slowly becomes something that's manageable again, and that reintegrates Native people as an actual constituency collectively. But that's an outside possibility. The two possibilities that we have in front of us right now are Kamala Harris and the system continues to degrade and probably accelerates in degrading constantly, or Donald Trump, in which case we get a partial reset to 2016 And the same narratives play out, although in a much more degraded state. Uh, Either one of these things is part of the same process of decline. Each one, none of these things ultimately holds off the ultimate question that our society is fundamentally unsustainable as it's currently constituted and needs to be radically restructured, and hopefully radically restructured in a way that does not ultimately impoverish everyone who lives here, which seems to be the ultimate desire and result of the people who are behind Kamala Harris. I don't think necessarily malevolently. I think that this is done more or less because they think that this is the only way. I mean, they think justifiably that this kind of let everyone in and borrow money against the future earnings of the new Americans. They think that is the only way to make our financial systems stable. But it's not going to stabilize them. The system is fundamentally broken. And so we have to do this. Like, we have to watch debates. And like and I got suckered into. I didn't watch the first debate. I watched the rehash. I'm like, oh no, what are they going to say that I haven't heard 1,000 times before? But it turned out that the first one was actually a significant debate, probably one of the more significant debates in my experience of American history and during my lifetime as an American. It was one of the more significant debates of that era because it completely knocked out an entire candidate. What was going on in the first debate was it was a vote of confidence was being given a vote of non-confidence to Joe Biden by the press. When Kamala Harris takes the stage, regardless of how badly she does, it doesn't matter what she does or doesn't say, or how many flubs she has, or how insecure she is about this, or oh my god, the fact checks. People still talk about fact checks. Everybody in politics has to lie constantly because politics is about sound bites. People win and lose egregious amounts of power due to sound bites that are said on television. And so if you have to lie or exaggerate or bend the truth to avoid saying a bad soundbite, you will always do that. And if you don't do that, you're bad at your job. I mean, I don't want to say that, like, being a politician gives you license to lie, but in many ways, a politician's job is to get elected, and therefore, a politician's job is to lie when they're confronted with the alternative of either lying or obtaining a bad soundbite that can be replayed on television shows. That's their job. Am I so surprised that they're lying? I'm surprised that they say anything that's true. But in case you didn't, completely get what was at stake, I mean, what came out? What was the big thing? After 2 weeks after this stupid debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, we don't have a debate over immigration. I mean, that is actually immigration and finances and crime. These are the actual political issues of our age. These are the things that are actually at stake right now. To what extent does America structure itself so that it essentially is an immigration Ponzi scheme? That is an actual live issue in this election. If Kamala wins, we will get a lot more immigration. If Trump wins, we will get less immigration. Still not the kind of stabilizing stopping of immigration that people on the right correctly believe is necessary to make sure that this country remains culturally stable or governable in any meaningful sense. But the process will be slowed down to a certain extent, and the insanity will be kind of reined in. This is a live issue. How many people actually debated this after the debate? Nobody. What did we debate? We debated cats. We debated cats. Oh, why did we debate cats? I mean, obviously, the biggest problem with Haitian immigrants are that they are remarkably culturally distant from the native population. They also, on average, have very high crime rates. Such that, and my wife pointed this out on Twitter, such that if I were an American and I was going to Port-au-Prince, the largest city in Haiti, the the United States government would issue a travel advisory. It would try to stop me from going to Haiti because it would say that my life was at risk being amongst that many Haitians. But if those same Haitians were to simultaneously come into a town, and it's usually only one or two towns, and completely demographically transform it, there's no risk. Of course, there's a risk. And of course, well, oh, immigrants are less violent than native citizens. Yeah, the way you get that is you aggregate immigrants from China and India and compare them to populations that also include the African American population in the United States. And from that, magically, you can get lower crime rates, hiding the higher crime rates of people from Haiti. Insofar as there is an issue, specifically with Haitians, it's the cultural and crime issues and other demographic problems that their unfettered presence in this country causes. Did we talk about that? No. We talked about cats. Serious writers on Substack. On Substack, people who are supposedly serious writers were really upset that Trump said that Haitians were poaching cats when in actuality they poached geese. This is disqualifying, you see, because the problem with Haitians is poaching. And the most relevant thing about poaching is whether you poached a cat or a goose. Who fucking cares? This is 100%. I mean, this is 100% an emotional issue. The emotional issue is, can you imagine a Haitian eating a cat? And of course, the image of a Haitian poaching a goose is way less bad than a Haitian poaching a cat. So, amazingly enough, that's a lie that matters, because that lie prays. I mean, it's performance. It's a performance of what is even going on, and it's not it's not just that I'm saying, like, and this is like, oh, this is an innocuous point. I mean, one of the most unoriginal sentiments about Americans have about their own election cycle is how stupid it is. When I was a kid, the first election that I have a conscious memory of was the 96 election of Dole versus Clinton. And in that, one of the sound bites was Clinton saying, "I never inhaled," when he had marijuana or something stupid like that. And then this was something that played on Fox, although I don't think Fox was known at that time as being like this conservative bastion. I think it was just Fox News's reputation was really more like, we're just yellow journalists. We run whatever is juicy. And this, the Monica Lewinsky scandal was very juicy. And I think Murdoch, the guy who owned it at that time, really walked into that. But this is before that. And this was like this, oh, I didn't inhale when I smoked marijuana or something stupid like that. And I wrote an article on this. The idea, you hear this and you see this growing up, and you hear people endlessly complaining about the stupidness of the average voter. That's not actually what I'm reacting about when I kind of wring my hands over this cat dialogue that went on Substack. When I say that this firestorm over whether it was a cat or a goose that was poached by Haitian immigrants, this wasn't going on Fox News or on Jerry Springer. This was going on the ostensibly highbrow political Substacks that I am subscribed to. This is going on in like the Atlantic and the New York Times. This is highbrow stuff. These are educated people that are swinging this way. Another point here, JD Vance. Okay, so again, I feel a little bit like I have to quote Sargon Carl Benjamin here in my reaction to JD Vance, when I can't not see myself in JD Vance to a huge degree. He's sort of the same age that I am. He has sort of the same hairstyle that I do. I guess if you grouped women into one giant brunette category. He kind of has the same taste in women. I'm not married to an Indian, but I am married to a brunette, right? Uh, we both played Magic the Gathering in high school, around about the same era. It's kind of fun. I mean, I imagine we both listened to Linkin Park too, or I guess I wasn't really a Linkin Park guy, but I was more into the older, alternative stuff long after all those bands had broken up. But this guy is my guy, right? He's not my guy. I don't really care. I don't vote, and I haven't paid. Oh, people like, oh, he's just pretending to be based. That's not what I'm reacting to. I have to call out the fact that I have an emotional reason to be for him, because one of the most bizarre elements of 2024 is seeing a certain class of intellectual women talk themselves into believing that this man is is a creepy misogynist. And okay, you're saying, okay, like yeah, stupid people who watch mainstream media will believe that. Of course, that's the narrative, right? Uh, what was? Sorry, JD Vance is weird. I drove through Virginia on my way from New Jersey to Canada, and every single not, I drove through Pennsylvania, and every single billboard was a Kamala Harris advertisement. And most of them were just this guy's face with the word weird. Weird. That's all the billboard said. It was just Trump's face, Vance's face, and the word weird. Okay, sure. Your average low information voter believes JD Vance is creepy and weird. Um, your hysterical readers, your hysterical older women reader of the New York Times will believe JD Vance is weird. But I'm seeing female academics tell me that JD Vance is a weird, sexist, racist, misogynist. I'm having female conservatives, female anti progressives following in on this narrative that JD Vance is a racist, sexist, misogynistic weirdo. And that's one thing, okay, well, I guess political advertising works. 10 years ago, 10 years ago, every one of these people I know, whether they were progressive or conservative, was gushing over J.D. Vance's book, A Hillbilly Elegy. But oh no, it's the crime of the century. We thought J.D. Vance was a good guy. We thought he was a good guy when he wrote a brilliant book about growing up poor in Ohio. And I can debate with Aidan Paladin whether Ohio is properly part of Appalachia or not. It certainly has the hillbilly culture. I've been there many times. Usually on Michigan High Ohio football games. But yeah, it has that vibe to it. But whether it's part of the Appalachian or not, he wrote a brilliant book about growing up in an impoverished community there. Everyone gushed about it, but now we didn't know he was a sexist, racist weirdo. And what defines him as a sexist, racist weirdo is that he supported the criminal law, the greatest lie in American history, the greatest lie that has ever been told in American public life. When he agreed with Trump, when Trump reported that the Haitians had poached a cat and not a goose. How can you trust somebody who does such a crime against the truth, misreporting the type of animal that was part of a rumor of poaching from unregulated Haitian immigrants, which nobody debates is actually happening, and which nobody debates is actually going in. Targeted is a strong word because it implies intent, but that is tightly focused in on certain communities so that they're totally demographically overwhelmed. But no, because he said cat and not goose, we now know that he's racist. Racist. Really? I mean, and people, I've heard conservative. I mean, I guess I am kind of saying that this is a female thing. I mean, it's not. It's not. Maybe I'll skip ahead to this, right? It's not because I guess it is sort of. It does come from predominantly a female audience, but these are conservative. These are people who have been victims of smearing by the progressive press. They know how this works. Yet somehow JD Vance, who's married to like an Indian woman who's like a Yale graduated lawyer and supports her career. If anything, my problem with JD Vance is that he's not patriarchal enough. I mean, come on, dude. I mean, imagine being a Christian and marrying a Hindu and not having her to convert to Christianity. I totally understand Hindus not wanting to convert to Christianity because they feel that Christianity is a colonial imposition on them. And they feel that they're kind of being colonized by giving in to the force of monotheism because they were obviously colonized by Islam very brutally by the Mughals and somewhat callously by the British, who turned a blind eye to many famines. And we might get onto that in the Churchill discourse. But, you know, there is a history of imperialism there. So I can see as an act of racial solidarity not wanting to convert away from Hinduism. But I'm not so sure how much racial solidarity you're pulling when you're already marrying outside of your group. And I'm not entirely convinced that there are that many devout Hindus. So if anything, I kind of fault JD Vance for not being patriarchal and domineering enough because mixed religion families or something that I don't know. I would never want to do both a mixed race and mixed religion family. It seems that that is, you know, you're putting two bullets in the gun on the Russian roulette there of major conflict. And I guess I put one bullet in because I'm married to a non-American, but I'm paying the cost right now as I broadcast to you from the totalitarian hellscape that is British Columbia. I'm paying the cost as we speak. But the prospect that JD Vance in endorsing Trump's misreporting of the type of animal being poached inside a live debate based on a rumor is the revelation that he is a rabid racist who wants to ethnically cleanse all people who aren't white from the United States is such insane pablum. And I'm hearing it come out of people who are supposedly intelligent people. I mean, case in point, you know, I got into this debate and lest this digress onto something about women, which, you know, is where obviously this is directed. I got into a debate on Substack with Pedro Gonzalez, of all people. And two things occurred from this interaction. That the first thing is that Pedro Gonzalez, we got into a debate about whether J.D. Vance showed himself to be a man of debased character because of the cat thing. And I guess fair enough. I mean, character is kind of a subjective thing, right? Character is kind of a, I can't force you. I mean, you know, I don't know I can't define bad character, but I know when I see it, sort of the definition of pornography, that also applies to character as well. And I certainly I can't, you know, that all we have to go on when we judge someone else's character is little anecdotes here and there. I think it's a little bit silly to end the scope of American political lies to have the animal type being poached carry so much weight, much less use the secondhand endorsement of that potentially inaccurate quote from Trump be the indictment on an entire man's life, the way it was with J.D. Vance. But there you go. But then the conversation with Pedro Gonzalez then segues. And Pedro Gonzalez, this guy is a serious journalist. This guy was one of the primary mainstream voices of dissident right ideas for a few years between 2020 and 2022. This guy's a big deal, you know. And I get these absolutely kind of weird opinions. And on him. And then furthermore, it segues into this thing like the online right. And this is where they all go with this. JD Vance is but a symptom of the online right. And the online right is dangerous. It's unagentic. It's full of losers who can't write or can't speak and don't have a coherent thought. All they do is sit around all day and complain about women and Jews and various. I'm just realizing that right now I did I complained about Kamala Harris and Sacha Baron Cohen. So here I am in a live stream where I did indeed complain about a woman, Kamala Harris, and a Jew, Sacha Baron Cohen. So I stand guilty of that, and you may judge whether my content is exclusively anti-Semitic and misogynistic from the fact that I made those criticisms. But I'm told that JD Vance unmasks the online right as being completely consumed by Dale Gribble voters. They're all Dale. We sit around and we talk about conspiracies, and we talk about how much we hate minorities. We talk about how much we hate women, and we have no ideas. We don't explore any cultural elements. We don't do any introspection. All we do is just seethe in hate, and we don't accomplish anything. And Pedro Gonzalez asks me, "What have you accomplished? The distant right will accomplish nothing." And then I say, "Well, Pedro, now that you mention it, just in my corner, we have started several publishing houses. We have made some mutual aid societies. I'm a member of two of them, two mutual aid societies and one fraternal organization in the Old Glory Club. We have, not without some drama, established several conferences. We're publishing books. We're hosting artists. If you're interested in any of these things, for instance, and you're on the West Coast, I will take this opportunity to show that coming up in early November, we have an event in Portland, Oregon that I will be attending. We have an event in early December in Toronto, Ontario. Toronto, Quebec. I'm married to a Canadian. That's how you know. That's how I know these things. I even know that the capital of the country that I currently reside in. That's how worldly I am. We have one in Toronto, Ontario, and then very close to my heart and my hometown, we have an art event coming up in which we're hoping to get more VIPs for in Sacramento, California. All of these things are institutions, and so I said to Pedro, the way you proceed as a right winger on the outs is to build the institutions and the organizations that were not present to legitimize your ideas when you were sort of in the wilderness, in the Wild West days of 2015, 2016, when we were all just posting on anonymous, posting behind anon accounts. I was one of the few people that actually used their face because I never thought I'd get so deep into controversial attitudes. And by the time, by the time the serious stuff came out, my docs already had been circulated 10,000 times. And I was already getting threats from those Antifa types, So, but we want more than OBSEC. We want support networks, and this is the thing you do. And I say, like, okay, what do you do? What are you doing, Pedro? And then nothing. Then he just repeats the same thing. The distant right's a bunch of losers. The distant right is this. The distant right is that. They're just like JD Vance. They're a bunch of losers. They're a bunch of low value. The elite human. They're not part of the elite human capital. I'm part of the elite human capital. But who's really part of the elite human capital? I caught this just the other day. Yeah. Do you know who's part? The real elite human capital. That would be our good friend here on the right, Richard Spencer, and friend of the show, and my own personal interlocutor, Richard Hanania. These guys define what elite human capital is. I can't think of anybody who's more elite than them. Why are we listening to losers like JD Vance, who all they've ever done is, is go to Yale in the military and successfully run for Senate and then become a vice presidential candidate. Why are we listening to those absolute low IQ dullards when we could be listening to these brilliant elitists? Richard Spencer, who I guess he started an organization in 2016 and then capsized his own movement because he couldn't stop throwing Romans and holding torchlight rallies. And the media destroyed his entire career. Uh, and I don't even really hold it against it. I don't hold him against the fact that he had bad optics in 2017. It was silly. But the idea that this guy is now the arbiter for the high-minded gold standard of what counts as non-progressive thought is silly. Richard Hanania, what is he known for? He's known for writing a bunch of articles about how women destroy dialectic spaces and then deciding, just kidding, I am a Reason Magazine style libertarian. I believe in open migration, the marketplace of ideas, and the good old fashioned American way. And most of all, and this is the majority you'll get from Richard Hanania, I believe that those Trumpists, those people who support Donald Trump, that support populism, are low IQ dullards. They are not elite human capital. I am elite human capital. I'm not so sure what makes Richard Hanania. I mean, why is Richard Hanania elite human capital? And we had this back and forth on Substack again with him just earlier this summer. Um, and he didn't answer any of my objections. He just accused me of complaining about Jews all the time. I can't think. I mean, I guess I did kind of a semi-satirical speech about my experience almost converting to Judaism as a young teenager in the conference talk. But longtime followers of the channel that have been with me as long as my Blue Yeti microphone will probably wonder, will probably not recognize my obsession with Jewish people on this show. This has never been a topic, but that's not true. See, Hanania is elite. And the second reason why I'm not elite human capital is I'm Catholic. Hanania made like 3 responses to me. And every single time he's like, Catholics are deplorable. Catholics are deplorable. Catholics are horrible because they're opposed to abortion. This disgusting Catholic pretension to be against euthanasia. This disgusting Catholic pretension to be against third trimester abortions. Then you ask me like, okay, Hanania, I live in Canada. Do you support the euthanasia policies that? Oh, no, 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 no. I support a hypothetical regime of euthanasia, not the actual regime of euthanasia as it exists in Canada. Well, do you support Roe v. Wade? Oh, no, 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 no. I don't actually support Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade was an intrusion on federalism. Roe v. Wade is an anti-libertarian law. All libertarians opposed Roe v. Wade. But I'll still hold it against you opposing it because you're Catholic. And because you're Catholic, that means you can't be elite human capital. Elite human capital. I mean, and it's kind of funny. I mean, it's like this like it's this complete retconning of history at this stage, where now you have all of these kind of ex alt-right figures. And again, I don't look. I mean, the alt-right was a very brief moment that existed for less than a year. People forget that. The alt-right existed for less than a year in 2017, basically. No one cared about it before 2017, and no one cared about it after 2018. That was its lifespan, and they didn't even care about it. The last time I heard about the alt-right in any serious capacity was when Richard Spencer debated Sargon of Akkad, aka Carl Benjamin, in December, or was it January of 2018? It was either December of 2017, January 2018. That was the last hurrah of the alt-right, the movement. And after that, it was just a solid line of bannings until there was no one left from that movement. I genuinely sympathize with the fact that they were banned unfairly off all of their social media platforms. I also think that a lot of their objections about anti whiteness were fundamentally correct and have been shown to be correct. They were vindicated on many issues. Anti-white anti-whiteness, the fact that you cannot divorce nationalism from ethnicity of some variety, the fact that anti the fact that unfettered immigration is a huge problem, especially from countries that have very, very low national IQs or are very culturally different from ours. All of these issues were anathema to discuss on the public stage. And now they're not. And they got banned for it, for being early adopters. That is something that they genuinely, I wouldn't necessarily applaud them overall in their careers because they did a number of things and certainly did a number of things that I think were really stupid. But for the heresies on which they have been vindicated, I will say that they were improperly banned. But this attempt to retcon themselves into being the true intellectual elites, and the Curtis Yarvins and the Lomez's and the Charles Haywoods and the people who make up kind of the lit scene in the more artsy dissident right sphere, those people being Dale Gribble dullards, is this insane inversion of actual fact. The alt-right, as it existed in 2017, was an entirely populist force. It was a force that existed mostly of people who were very, very low information people who did not read a lot, coming onto a scene and getting sucked up into a huge populist moment. The dissident right that Hanania decries constantly, as he has directly addressed me and many other people, is largely an intellectual scene developed around a bunch of old writers, Carlyle, Burnham, de Maistre, de Jouvenel, and is piloted by people who are interested in art and in developing ideas. There is no comparison. And the idea that they're trying to retcon this by kind of ducking around and playing the Uno Reverso card on the pile is kind of weird, but it oddly works. You can tell that I literally just screenshot this because you can see um, the auto correction from LibreOffice here. But all of this perspective, it it brings me back to, I think, one of the most interesting anthropological phenomenons of 2024. Something that characterizes our present moment that I can't stop talking about, which was that around April of this year, an enormous number of the women associated with this scene all immediately got angry and turned against the audiences that they had and started repeating the Richard Hanania line that all of the distant right were a bunch of idiot conspiracy theorists. I mean, I guess I'll name names here. Like, and you know, I'm not particularly happy with this person's recent uh, choices of guests nor their sentiments because they are kind of targeted in my direction, although my name's never used. But you know, here I could mention Alex Kashuda, a person I think who has legitimate grievances against and who's been mistreated online by trolls and perhaps in some non-online settings by very, very bad people. This has led to a turnaround where all conversation orbits around a hypothetically idiotic right wing person who's called the distant right and how horrible they are. And the conversation never fastens on any point of disagreement. They're not saying, Sorry about that. When did I mute myself? Okay. Let's see. I don't know exactly when I can back up to. That is absolutely so. When I adjusted the microphone, I guess I muted myself. This is why I should actually have my glasses when I do this thing. There can never be a distributed stream without there being some mishap here. So, so apparently now I know that this button, it's a slide button. So literally, if I touch this thing, it mutes. That's absolutely disastrous. I have to not touch my microphone ever. Um, okay. So let's see, where was I here? Um, I mean, it's been 6 months of this complaints about the distant right and about with no really head to it, with no real head to it. People complain about rightoids, but they never name names. They complain about people who are not human capital. They'll even accuse you of not being elite human capital. I'm not so sure how I am so much less educated than Richard Hanania. As a matter of fact, I think I'm probably better educated than Richard Hanania, and I certainly think that I'm better read than Richard Hanania. This whole dynamic is not this whole dynamic exists in a feeling of pure vibes. It's pure vibes. There is no substance to it. We are existing in 2020 as a discourse free situation, as a discourse free election year. All of 2024 is characterized by one notable absence, and that absence is the absence of any mainstream discourse between the two people who are opposing each other. Sure, people will, in its place, all we have is vibes. In 2020, if we go back a year, people had uh, that was the height of discourse in some sense. That was the height of blood sports. There were two eras of blood sports. There was 2019, where you had the right-wing version of blood sports with the Warskis and JF Gariepi, and then you had 2020 with Destiny and Vosh and the various Destiny clones being the left-wing version of blood sports. But 2020 was all discourse all the time. People were constantly yelling at each other. 2016, there was even more discourse. There was even more discourse in 2016. That was the era of the response video. People actually felt ideas were in play. 2024, we're having an election year this year, and I haven't heard a single serious debate that wasn't just an optics competition. And it's not just the fact that the politicians are doing just optics competitions. I am talking about the people on Substack, the people, the pe- the people who the people on Substack, the people who are supposed to be the intellectual gatekeepers of respectable dialogue, and they sound like a bunch of teenage girls. They sound like a bunch of people who are just completely focused on who's up, who's popular, who's not. That's all there is. I have to actually see when was the last time that someone heard me. I'm gonna have to check this 1 second. Someone to Spencer. I think I talked a little bit about uh, Alex Kashuda. Okay, so I mentioned that whole drama. Okay, well, I'll just continue going. I'll cut this out of the actual podcast. As usual, I'm very, very bad at editing these podcasts. I always put it off. It's always my last priority. Um, yeah, so I mean, I find this incredible. I find this absolutely incredible that we're having an election year and none of the intellectual people, none of the serious people who talk about ideas want to talk about ideas in anything other than how gross the other person is. Like, he has bad vibes. He isn't cool. He's weird. That's not just a billboard in Pennsylvania. That's an entire that's half of my Substack feed. That's half of the channels on YouTube. Nobody's talking about ideas. It's something like Morgoth said, that there is an event that's going to happen that has nothing to do with our ideas, called the election of 2024. And the question there is, will the machinery of our government generate Kamala Harris, or will the populist wave overwhelm it? And our ideas have absolutely no bearing on that. And in that space of zero control over politics, we've retreated to essentially being a bunch of teenage girls calling each other names on the playground. Uh, I can listen to 6 months of my favorite podcast, and the only thing discussed on that podcast is the current state of the right wing. And in no episode of that podcast will any idea on the right ever be discussed critically. It will all be a continuous discussion over the optics of the right. And not even the optics of anyone particular, the optics of vague online people. The same kind of optics that can get people to talk themselves into believing that JD Vance is a racist, misogynistic weirdo, even though no one believed that about him 3 months ago. No one believed that about him certainly 3 years ago. That's our politics. Our politics is completely effeminate. And this is the problem here. And this is why I want to deal with this topic a little bit delicately. When I say effeminate, I don't mean women. There are a number of women who are brilliant contributors to this sphere. What I mean is a certain female perspective on politics and a certain female way of dealing with politics. And to a certain extent, everyone has internalized this. Are people still saying that I'm muted? This is ridiculous. You make one mistake in a stream. This is one of the eccentricities. Now I know that I can't hold the microphone where the mute button is, because it's feather trigger sensitive and will immediately mute me if I adjust it either further or closer to my face. So the problem is not women. The problem is an effeminate attitude towards politics. Or I should say, really, a feminine attitude towards politics. Effeminate simply means feminine behavior where it's inappropriate to have feminine behavior. And I hate to say this, but while I do not believe that politics is exclusively a male sphere, it is exclusively a masculine sphere. The only real politics are masculine politics. And to the extent that you have feminine politics, you have not real politics. You have fake politics. Effeminate politics are fake politics. And that is the problem, I feel, a lot of times, is that some female content creators lapse into a very female way of thinking about political problems. Case in point, this is sort of the Ne Plus Ultra. I've used Ne Plus Ultra, I think, 3 times. This is sort of the pinnacle of female thinking about politics. Again, this is more radical than the election system. Maybe people will actually get what's going on here, the problem with this. So in Korea, they're having essentially nosediving birth rates. Now, I know some people who believe intellectually that birth rate decline is not that big of a deal if it's where the United States is right now, which is like 1.5 children per woman. Korea's is sub 1. This society is killing itself due to low birth rates. It is possible, although I don't think mathematically it works out. And if there was a dialectic, I think I could argue the case very well. That says 1.5 is sustainable. I don't think it is, but some people have made the case that it is. 0.8 is not sustainable. And it's not sustainable immediately. This is the immediate death of your society in a very real, short-term way. Short of some miracle of technology, your society will die. This cannot not be an issue. The feminist movement in Korea, and you can see this on TikTok. You can go to TikTok and watch these videos. They're actually very popular. If you go onto TikTok and look up Korean feminists, there's this huge movement of Korean feminists. They're going like, we did it, guys. Yeah, go girl power. We're tanking the birth rate. We're refusing to have babies. And now our entire society is going to go extinct. Wow, we did it. We're awesome. And they're spiking the football on a trend that is going to completely destroy their society and radically decrease their standard of living. And they're high-fiving each other over this. They're welcoming their doom in through the front door with rapturous applause. Like, and this didn't happen in the Iliad, but it happened in one of the sequels to the Iliad, because the Iliad ends before the Trojan horse. But you hear stories about this in the Odyssey when there's a flashback, I believe, where the Trojans tear down their wall to bring in the Trojan horse that will destroy their city and burn it to the ground. And it's greeted by rapturous applause of the people. They welcome their doom in through the door, and they're rapturously applauding it. Why? Well, that's because it's victorious. It's the new thing, guys. Death of our society is the new thing. And if you're on the side of your civilization's destruction, that means you're on the winning side. That means you're on the elite side, because the point of politics isn't to fix societal problems. The point of politics is to be on the winning side. The point of politics, guys, is to be part of the current thing. It's to be part of the elite side. So now for a year, you've had Korean feminists celebrating the death of their own society. And they go, oh my God, they're so oppressed that they're doing this. That's not true. Korea is richer. I mean, in a sense, Korean culture is causing this. But what's causing this in Korean culture is not some specific thing that's happening to women. It's the fact that their work culture is so stifling and imposing that it gives people almost no time to live their lives and feel spiritually edified, and depression is off the roof. Um, that's what's causing this, insofar as that there is some kind of proximate cause to this disaster. The cause lies in the work culture, which, if anything, affects women less than it does Korean men. But if you heard it from a Korean feminist, they would tell you that the reason why this is happening is they don't have enough money. Bro, South Korea is one of the richest countries in the entire world. And moreover, it's richer than at any other time Korea has ever been, when it's had birth rates far in excess of replacement. But no, you won. And once more, you open up your Substack feed, reading people who are supposedly serious intellectuals, these people who are writing, and their attitude of these turf, and they're kind of sort of these sort of more turf people. They're on Substack for a reason, otherwise they would be in mainstream media. These people get kicked out for being anti-trans. They're still feminists, and they're like, did you hear of the revolution that's going on in Korea? The revolution of destroying your society because you want more stuff. Wait, what more stuff do you want? More stuff. We want more money. Women don't have enough money. That's why the birth rate's going down. Well, you're rich. We don't have enough feminism. We're not equal enough to men. Well, men are crushed by a corporate structure. No, we're just not happy. We're on team societal destruction. I mean, really, what you're seeing is cope. I think I'm in the process of reading Julius Evola's Pagan Imperialism as a review that was asked for me from Imperium Press. They gave me a free copy, and I'm writing up a review. I think they gave it to a lot of people, but they knew that I was a critic of online paganism. So I think they hired, they expect me to be like those old Muppets from the Muppet Show that, throw Cracker Jack and insults at the guy from the pod. They want me to be the grumpy old man on this book and give a bad review, which will be entertaining to read. I kind of like Evola, but I have been highly critical of Evola in the past too. And one of the things that I've been critical is that he tends to use concepts that are very vague. In this case, I think that there is a way of thinking about this that decenters females from this, this is lunar politics. This is fundamentally politics that is lunar in persuasion. Things happen, winners are decided, and then you arrive on the scene after the events happened. And the point of politics is to get with the vibes, it's to get with the side that's already won. Politics is cope. Politics is arranging yourself so that you look like you're on the team that has already won. And in Korea's case, death has won. So you should be on team death. That's lunar politics. If the sun's radiating death, then you're on team death because that's the side that won. The qualities of lunar politics, and you'll see this in everyone. And this is something that I think, I'll get into this, but part of the reason why I do these podcasts is so that the point of this podcast is not like, oh, hey, this guest appeared on Alex Kashuta's podcast, and I really disagree with them. As a matter of fact, one of the guests, non-Zionism, who appeared last time, has agreed to. He criticized me directly, not on Kashuta's show, but on his blog. And a lot of the criticisms he repeated about rightoids on Kashuta's podcast directly resembled the criticisms he leveled at me personally. So I invited him on the show to make his accusations or problems be known, and we'll try to come to a cordial agreement because I very much respect Jewish nationalists, and I see them as fellow believers, even though I kind of see their religion as a little heretical, a little bit wrong, so to speak. But I respect any true believer. I respect, whether they're a pagan, Jewish, or a Muslim. Any believer. I even kind of respect crazy people from history or from fiction that are true believers, even though they're nuts. I respect a true believer, and as such, I respect that criticism. But the point is not to push back on various individuals who've appeared on podcasts or in other contexts that I have problems with. The point is to understand what is this mode of politics that we see in these Korean feminists, that we see in these conservative women who are losing their shit over J.D. Vance when they loved him 1 year ago, that we see from the people who complain about a non-optical right wing when 4 years ago they were throwing Roman salutes and doing tiki torch marches. What mistake are they making so that we can make sure that we do not make it ourselves? Again, this is not about women. This is about a perspective on politics that we might call effeminate, or, to borrow Evola's term, lunar. The first thing you notice about lunar perspectives on politics is that they cannot clearly state their objectives, principles, or a non-victim identity that they belong to. This is a critical part of all modern politics, and the more you realize it, the more you realize that everybody in the modern world has an effeminized version of politics in this day and age. That is how politics work in the modern world, is that they're highly effeminate. But this is what I used to call the view from nowhere. uh, and the view from nowhere is great. So everything has something wrong with it. Everyone is not as educated as they could be, hasn't read enough, hasn't done the work, hasn't put in the mileage. Everyone could do better. So you just show up at the scene, you list a variety of things that are wrong with the ideology in question, and then you say something like, that's why this thing has been deboomed. They need to do better. They need to do the work. They need to go the extra mile. Nothing's actually been learned. And for all I know, the person making the criticism has all of those same problems plus some. This is, I thought, what we had learned with the new atheist movement, but you'll know this from all sort of these. This is, you see this with the TERFs too. The TERFs love complaining about online misogynists. They love complaining about trans activists and trans insanity. And God knows that I really dislike Andrew Tate. And I really think that the trans insanity is going to go down in history as being one of our great civilizational crimes we've perpetrated against our own children. Do you know what the TERFs never talk about? The TERFs never talk about what a healthy model is for human families that actually generates children. They will never talk about this ever. Hypothetically, it's what the '90s family looked like. You know, the Simpsons family. That's their model. When in doubt, when you don't have any ideas, just reference the 1990s and say, I want to go back to there. And then your problem with not having your own ideas just magically disapparates because, the '90s. But the problem is that the Simpsons family from the '90s, or the Family Matters family, or the Cosby family from the '90s, is, in the perspective of 2024, that's trad, that's conservative. So you're still trad, you're just trad from a different era. That doesn't work. So, and they know it doesn't work. That's why they never say that explicitly. I guess people like Wokel Distance says that. He literally says, I want to go back to the '90s. Sometimes James Lindsay says that. But these people on Substack, the cool, the TERFs that are trying to be cool, they'll never say that. But they will endlessly criticize religious people. They'll endlessly criticize the trans ideology. They'll endlessly even criticize Jordan Peterson. But it's viewed from nowhere. They don't have any objectives. They don't have any principles they talk about. I don't know what their principles are. Their principles are just pure criticism. I'm blocking this one with my video. Fundamentally, lunar ideologies are non generative. They will talk for hours about any number of things. The only thing they will ever get to at the end of these digressions, at the end of these conversations, is a new way to structure their grievances. Here is 10 million horror stories about this ideology. This is how the distant right harmed me. This is how Christianity brainwashed me. This is how I almost fell into the trans pipeline. This is how I'm personally harmed by the transgender movement. This is how feminism harmed me. This is how the Republican Party harmed me. This is why I finally left the Democrats. This is why I finally left my identity as American. This is why I finally fled my hometown. This is why I finally fled New York. It will be a series of things that you left behind, a series of ideologies that you discarded, a series of principles that you no longer believe, a series of religions that you've escaped, a series of belief systems that have harmed you personally because they made you believe something that wasn't true, even though we're not talking about the idea that's not true, we're just talking about how it harmed you. Lunar ideologies, lunar politics, only ever generates a new compelling way to complain. It will never say, here are my principles. I endorse this perspective. It will never say, here is Thomas Carlyle and his vision of the hero in history. This is great. It will never say, this is the Christian religion. This is great. Believe in this. It will never say, this is the pagan religion. I know I'm reading Julius Evola right now. I'm not a pagan, but I appreciate the fact that he's putting something generative into the world. This is something, believe it. This is even transgenderism. It's a cult, but at least it's an ethos. At least it actually, I mean, that's the most masculine thing about all of this stuff is actually transgenderism comes bodily forward, seizes you, and forces you to take a definitive step that makes you actually make a decision in this world. That's more than I can say about all of the turf publications that I've been reading for the last year and a half. They're never generate anything other than a list of grievances. Sometimes the grievances go left, sometimes the grievances go right, but it's only a list of grievances. Here's an interesting thing that I've also noticed. This is about the elite human capital people, and this is one of the reasons why we have to remind ourselves that although I'm using lunar and effeminate, I am not talking about women. There are women like Aidan Paladin, who are brilliant thinkers and great podcasters, by the way. I listen to the Broken podcast, Broken Crown podcast with Spoon, Aristocratic Utensil, also known as Spoon, and Aidan Paladin. And they kind of have this like Abbott and Costello routine going a little bit, like where Aidan is, no, not Laurel and Hardy, right? The Aidan is Oliver Laurel, and Spoon is John Hardy or James Hardy. I can't remember who Hardy's first name was. It's hilarious. So I'm not talking about women. And this is a good example of this. The whole discussion over who is elite human capital is fundamentally effeminate. The whole concept of meritocracy is fundamentally effeminate. Men don't prove themselves through discourse. They prove themselves through making things and for taking stands around specific ideas. Richard Hanania will endlessly talk about how elite he is, or more often, even worse, he'll talk about how unelite his opponents are, how they believe all these disgusting things like Catholicism and how they're all horrible anti-Semites. I really don't know how he reconciles constantly complaining about Catholics and also treating anti-Semitism. I guess like complaining about Catholics is elite human capital, but complaining about Jews is low human capital. This is one of the great contradictions of the Richard Hananias of the world. But this entire discussion is effeminate. Men demonstrate that they're elite capital just by generating their stuff and either having people love it or having people listen to them or helping people or creating organizations or making companies or taking a step forward or advancing things or dedicating themselves to ideas, becoming the warrior or the ascetic or the father, getting on a soapbox and expounding on how elite you are, or going around and saying, oh, that side won, therefore they're elites. Half of the perspectives Richard Hanania has are not actually ideas. They're just him culturally affecting certain attitudes that are considered elite. Case in point, his attitude on Roe v. Wade. Richard Hanania is a libertarian. He believes Roe v. Wade was bad law because it's obviously not in the Constitution. This obviously was something that, according to his own ideology, needed to go through the democratic process. But he will constantly signal pro-Roe v. Wade ideas because that is the side that's powerful. Elitism and meritocracy is central in lunar politics because it's who has won. But it's always centered as a nominative category, not as something that you do or believe in. And it's always conceptualized as a spectator. The elitism is given to us, and it is our job to embrace it. It is being given onto us like the moon accepts light from the sun, but what we have to do is to accept it. I obviously endorse a lunar perspective when it comes to religion, insofar as God is the sun and humankind is fundamentally lunar in relationship to him. But that's not our job as political actors. Fundamentally, whenever you experience politics like this, politics has happened elsewhere, and you're just picking up the refuge. You're accepting the dispatches of what's already happened. This is not real politics. Spectator politics are not real politics. One of the reasons why democracy is kind of a lie itself. Condescension and shame as a means of enforcement. Now, all groups shame to a certain extent. All groups have rules. All groups have a certain amount of condescension because all groups are hierarchical. In order for people to be higher, some people have to be lower. But you'll notice that in a properly masculine group, the rank is a fact, not a motion of speech or a motion of adjudicating ideas. A great example of masculine energy that I always appreciate, and I know I've discussed this, but and it's something about me. Maybe it's my residual Englishness from growing up in an Anglo culture. Um, but it could be equally Teutonic because Germans famously love Shakespeare. The greatest example of masculine vigor in dialectic is Henry V and the speech in the Battle of Agincourt, before the Battle of Agincourt on St. Crispin's Day. Uh, in this, rank and office are supremely respected, but at the same time completely fluid. There is zero. The king is king and great in this moment. He is at the height of his kingliness. Yet, there is absolutely no condescension. The telltale sign of lunar politics is where condescension is at the core of the mode of everything, establishing who is higher and who is lower, and then grouping your opponents in with a group that's lower and then kind of whispering about them. Oh, you wouldn't want to be associated with that group of people. You wouldn't want to be associated with them. You wouldn't want to be one of those horrible people. You can see this also in terms of those horrible TikTok trends when they had that Kamala Harris girl. There was this horrible woman. Probably people have already forgotten about this. This was a month ago. She was in charge of the Kamala Harris committee, and people discovered that her entire TikTok was she delivered these lectures where she would talk to a hypothetical adult that was off screen, usually a Republican or someone she disagreed with, and she would say something like, I think, Uncle, we have to listen to other people. We have to listen to other people. I'm talking now. Quiet hands. I'm talking now. She talked to them like they were a kindergartner. And the entire, and people were eating this up on TikTok, progressives in particular. They love this talking to my political enemies like they are children. It is absolutely infuriating. It absolutely makes you want to rebel against whoever is doing this to you. But this is the mode of lunar politics because it's really, really fun to be on the opposite end of condescension. I guess I don't really find it particularly fun. I I kind of find it fun to throw a punch in a debate, but I really don't like glowering at people who I consider my social inferiors, much less talking down to them. But I think a number of people really, really love that because it works so brilliantly. As soon as you're talking down to somebody, as soon as you can imagine somebody being your racist uncle and you're condescending to them, it makes you feel powerful. That's why, to go back to the Matt Walsh movie, the perspective on when he wheels out his racist uncle. Who stands up to go, fuck you, racist uncle, who I never met before? I hate you, even though I don't know anything about you. Well, it's all women. It's all women. They love the group dynamic of coming in. And, again, it's I don't want to center women in this conversation, but this is a mode. This is the female form of bullying, and it works brilliantly. And it is fundamentally the core of lunar politics. Here's a more interesting one. Um, lunar politics frequently fights over issues that aren't real political issues, that don't correspond to active power struggles. Now, this is interesting because this absolutely corresponds to things that men do, and I've seen men do more, even though it is a fundamentally effeminate behavior and has no place in politics. Real politics is about how power is structured and about how who has the right to make the exception and who has the mandate of heaven. That is the critical element of politics. And also making the right policy choices to ensure the sustenance of our society into the future. That is why we do politics. Fights over vanity issues are fundamentally fake politics. A good example of this, I don't know where I want to start. I'll start with the mainstream one. A lot of pro-life men and women are guilty of this year. Abortion is not an active political issue. Democrats desperately want it to be an active political issue. They would benefit if it were an active political issue. There is no active, meaningful debate over abortion. There is only vanity. The American people are not in a position to ban all abortions. That will never happen while the elite cultural power apparatus is in place. Unless there's a cultural revolution. And to do that, it would require a complete replacing of both the government and the immediate elite class that supports it, and a complete re-education of the American people, which I would, God willing, like to see. But short of that, abortion is not getting banned. Women are not going to be the ones stuck with the bag, stuck with the bill come down from the sexual revolution. If the sexual revolution is in place, abortion is necessary politically. Everyone knows this. Abortion is a fake issue. It wasn't even decided by Congress. It was decided by the courts, an unelected body. You get baited into discussing abortion during this season of politics. You have fundamentally, publicly, you have fundamentally gotten baited into giving away power irresponsibly to people who actively want to hurt you. This is not a live political issue. And saying that you're not going to support a leader if you vote because he doesn't have the pure dimension on this principle. And I am 100% in alignment with the Catholic Church's views on abortion, ethically and religiously. But this is political realism. This is politics. You're going to hand the country over to people who are funded by abortionists because you're not getting the right signal sent to you right now because Donald Trump isn't radical enough on abortion for you. This is not how adults conceptualize reality. This is not an adult conversation. This is a conversation about appearances. I'm going to be fair here. I'll give an example from my own circle that's almost entirely comprised of men. The question of religion is ultimately the most important issue of our time. 100%. The question of the nature of God is the most important question in human history. You know, I say religion is the most important question of our time because we live in a particularly irreligious age. The fight currently going on as it exists between pagans and Christians is a fake political issue. This is not a real political issue. There is no real power struggle between right-wing Odinists and Christians. Right-wing Odinists are more opposed to left-wing Odinists than they are to your median Christian voter. Going up to Christians and calling them Christ cucks politically in public is a meaningless political battle. And similarly, I've been rightfully accused of making grandiose statements against pagans sometimes that have been somewhat derogatory. And I certainly want to convert pagans. but I don't want to insult political allies. And certainly, insults are rarely a path to conversion. This is a 100% vain pursuit, and it is 100% lunar. We are fighting over who has the most status. Politics isn't about status, politics is about power. And the more you fracture your coalition, the less power you have. Period. The more you insult your own side in public, the less power there is in your sphere to go around. If you project all Christians are losers to the outside world, your enemies take that and they take a step forward. If you communicate that all pagans are lunatics that are burning down buildings, the security apparatus of the United States will use that to obtain funding to counter right wing groups, which will include Christian groups as well as pagan ones. This is a spiritual issue. This is an issue, a dialectic that needs to happen. Absolutely. It's the most important dialectic. It is not a real political issue. It is not a real political issue. Like I said before, there is no issue that is more important than religion and reestablishing religion. But the dialectic, and that is the distinction, is not a real political dialectic. Just like pro-life is 100% correct, but its active existence on the public stage undermines its own cause. And if we're talking about politics as they really are, which I think we have an obligation to do as men, certainly, and as women willing to temporarily occupy a masculine role, then we can't talk about how hypothetically important they are in a context that is not our particular moment. The thing that we have to talk about is this an issue that's important right now? And it is not. I will pursue discussions about paganism and continue my critiques of paganism, of which I made many. But I will do that in the context of friendly persuasion, in the hope that I can convert them to the correct way of viewing the world. Not as a means of publicly humiliating people to pour gasoline on the fire of a state that will inevitably use that power to come after me and the religion of Christ. That's the responsible way to pursue this. And fundamentally about lunar politics, it always follows power and never leads. I wonder what number this is. This is another thing true about the elite human capital people. Ostensibly, you could see the elite human capital people really kick into gear after that infamous essay that Curtis Yarvin wrote about hobbits and elves. Hobbits and elves. So this was his idea that there are hobbits and there are elves. And the elves need to rule and the hobbits need to follow and people need to stay in their lane and so on and so forth. You know, all of that good stuff. The idea Yarvin was going for was noblesse oblige. The elves that he was hoping for were elves that loved hobbits. That's what he has said. And he is, in that moment, 100% accurate. There are people that are more able to rule, and you need to be an elite of some type to rule to a certain extent. And there are some people who are just temperamentally incapable of ruling in a fundamental way, and that is an issue as well. The point, though, is that the elves have to love the hobbits, or they are bad elves. I can't believe he inverted that, because it should be the light elves should love the hobbits and the dark elves should hate them, right? The problem with our current elite class is that it hates ordinary Americans. Okay, so supposedly they internalize this elves versus hobbits. They call themselves elite human capital. And what is the first thing all of these elite human capital people do? They immediately get up in a public forum and they start publicly insulting working class people. You deserve your own dispossession. You deserve to get less behind, to be more behind. These guys are all chuds. That's what characterizes them. And it also characterizes them as fundamentally effeminate. Because masculine power does not insult that which is less than it is. It takes the power away from what is less than it is. And especially if that thing is something that is under its protection, as hobbits would be to elves, as female as to male, it does not insult it. Maybe you should take, this is also something that people need to realize in our own circles. If you're angry at women for behaving in this way, do not take it out on them by insulting them. Never insult women, even if they're doing something that is fundamentally passive aggressive and forwarding insults against you that aren't really directed to you. Never insult women. Never insult them to their face. Never insult them collectively. That is effeminate. Effeminate or lunar politics are fundamentally insecure. They can't be noble. They can't participate in noblesse oblige because they're afraid that if they ally with the weak, they'll be perceived as weak. If they ally with the deplorables and say, hey, look at these Dale Gribble people in the sticks. I know that I'm elite human capital and I'm not one of them, but these guys are people too and they need to be respected. They can never say that because if they say that, they'll be associated with them. And being associated with weakness means you are weak. That was one of our previous points. Meritocracy in lunar politics is perceived as fundamentally associative, not as fundamentally oriented around something that you do or something that you demonstrate. Since association and praise or insult is all they have, no genuine strong person who practices lunar politics will ever be able to say to a lesser person, I may be stronger than you, but we are of equal dignity, and I will defend you on the battlefield. Similar to that which was given from Henry V to the yeoman bowmen at the Battle of Agincourt. For he who sheds blood with me today will be my brother, ne'er he be so vile, this day so gentle his condition. And gentlemen abed in England will curse themselves and hold their manhood cheap when they speak with any who fought alongside me on this St. Crispin's Day. That's the cornerstone of real politics. But you can't say that as a Richard Hanania. You can't say that as any of these people who practice this kind of elite human capital shit, because the second they actually acknowledge the dignity of the people who are below them, they'd be associated with them and they would look less elite. Henry is not worried about looking less like a king by acknowledging the dignity of his Welsh yeoman because he's practicing real politics. Because he's not worried about this shit. I think this is our last one, or the last point before I sum it all up. And this is the fundamental thing about lunar politics. They are created by institutions. When things are stable and we are all comfortable, we can have politics that's fundamentally about reputations and whispering and the perception of being prestigious. But the problem is we can have vibe-based politics. Vibe-based politics aren't original to 2024. The only thing that's notable about 2024 is that it's only vibe-based politics. There's no attendant intellectual conversation that's going on between the parties. It is purely vibe-based politics. Vibe-based politics is a luxury of how people behave inside stable institutions. But once the institutions destabilize, vibe-based politics doesn't work anymore. Why doesn't it work anymore? Because it's not reliable anymore. One of the best essays of this last year was Zero H.P. Lovecraft's review of Into the Spider-Verse. when he talks about the fundamental necessity of having a culture, because he says power is essentially determined through small interactions and people being perceived as greater or lesser than inside a conversation. And he said this very, very notable piece of this notable quote, and I quote it all the time, and I quote it again here. He said, all of these women who are participating in the Great Awakening, and this was written in 2022, when it was not yet apparent that something had peaked and we were kind of coming down from all of this wokeness stuff. But he said, all of these women who are endlessly going on about Black Lives Matter and about the horrific quality of American racism, the second power shifts hands at a high level that will impact them, all of these women who are in these salons, they will swear up and down that they were racist. I am racist. I am truly racist. And I have always been racist. And if you were to remind them that there was a time when they were anti-racist, they will get offended. They will hold it against you and they will call you misogynists. And they will say you were cruel and they will call you all kinds of names. And there will probably be a lot of crying. Vibes are not stable. And you can't build on them because they'll be gone the next day. The problem of modern politics is that everything in our institution is pushing us towards feminine politics, but feminine politics are futile in the present world. There's nothing more futile than participating in these feminine politics. You know, someone's talking about Islam. I always thought it was weird when, you know, Avola says that there's something that was particularly lunar about Islam. Because Islam is known, and I'm reading Thomas Carlyle's Hero and Hero Worship, and one of the most notable chapters in Thomas Carlyle's Hero and Hero Worship is he pens this great essay about the heroism of the Muslim prophet Muhammad. He says, Muhammad was incorrect, but he was a true believer, and he fought for what he believed in. And we should respect him as a hero for that. And we can't comprehend, you know, he was a hero who spread by the sword. Well, how did he, and Thomas Carlyle says this, how did he obtain those swords? He obtained those swords by belief. And I thought that was kind of clever, isn't it? I mean, Christians like to pride ourselves on the amount of conversions that were done essentially in a power vacuum when there was no power above them that could give the converts any incentive. But Islam had to have spread through belief, otherwise who wielded those swords with such vigor and valor? Okay, but with what one hand I give to Islam, with the other I will take away with a criticism, as is kind of my nature, I guess. I can see what Avola means when he says Islam is fundamentally lunar. And it's not, and being warlike is a very masculine virtue, but do you know what the fundamentally feminine or effeminate thing about Islam is? I have said before that I would respect pagans if they tried to convert me. And many Muslims have tried to convert me, and I respect them for that effort. That shows they're true believers. But one thing, the biggest stumbling block for me in Islam, I wouldn't convert because I don't believe that. I believe in the veracity of the Gospels historically, and in the message of Christ contained therein, which is the factual contention. But culturally, the thing that put me off from Islam is that every single Muslim person that has attempted to convert me, they say this thing. They say, don't you want to join the winning side? Don't you want to join? Islam is the winning side. Don't you want to join the winning side? And my reaction is, fuck no. I don't want to join the winning side. And the fact that in a conversation about God, you're trying to entice me with the historical promise of victory is insulting to the conversation. God's will should move first. Victory moves after. And if God's will moved in a direction and willed victory, me to fight in a battle where I knew I would lose, I would be compelled to fight and die in that losing battle because God's will is the primary mover and victory is the follower. God's will is the sun and victory is the moon. But every Muslim I've talked about talks about God like the moon is the sun, as if victory came first and God's glory came afterwards. Maybe it's cultural. I mean, again, my contentions are factual. Maybe it's cultural. But that is such a lunar way of conceptualizing the question. Um, and I see that in that same lunar quality you'll see on display in all feminine politics of the age. The appeal to what's going to win and the appeal to what is perceived as meritocratic rather than what is actually true, rather than what is actually generative for a civilization going forward. We're being crushed by an excess of politics in one sense, but by a supreme absence of politics in another sense. The absence of politics in a sense of that there is no one actually communicating a politics of real masculinity and ownership. The most fundamental question somebody asked me this year was, why are we still doing this? If our situation is so, hard and deplorable, why are we even consuming content anymore of a political nature? I would love to have debates with people. I guess I kind of signed up for one with non-Zionism. That might be a little bit spicy. I think it'll be on a Sunday or something, or a Saturday evening. I think that's how we worked it out. So it would be after his Sabbath and before mine. um, but why do we do this? We're here to develop the right attitudes towards politics so that we can continue to build for the future. At the beginning of this live stream, I mentioned all those organizations that were coming into existence and that were working on projects, events that you could join up. There are a similar set of events that are going on the East Coast. I guess technically Toronto is the East Coast, but I'm less involved in the East Coast now and now more on the West. These are all opportunities to build. And in the overwhelming likelihood, the election of 2024 is going to end politics in a real way in the West. It'll be imperative for us to create spaces of support and fraternity where real essential politics can be practiced so that we can figure out what we need to get for our people, for our principles, for our faiths to go forward. To practice real politics, which is to say, practice solar politics, which is to say, practice masculine politics. Non-engagement is not an option. I skipped that. So how do we go from vibe democratic politics to real ownership-based politics? The critical lessons of real politics. Know where you stand is the first lesson. No politics, no view from nowhere, no politics of the critic, no culture of the critique, no talking about abstract political priorities that are divorced from morals. All politics have a moral dimension. All truth has a moral dimension. There is no non-teleological politics. There is no value neutral way of approaching this thing. There is no mind that's disembodied from culture. And furthermore, even to engage with you in a meaningful dialectic, I need to know what your values are. And the first thing I'm going to talk about with non Zionism is I'm going to talk about his own loyalties. I know he's Jewish and I respect him as a believer. I think he's Israeli or something. I respect Israel for defending its blood and soil. What else is a nation supposed to do? I think that the government of the Middle East needs to be reorganized radically to stop what's going on with Israel. And I think Israel is perpetrating a lot of things that are not conducive to order in the way I would like to see it, especially in the Middle East. But I certainly don't blame people for fighting for their people. I do not know how to approach politics with somebody like Destiny. I do not know how to do the politics of the bug ban. It's just a game for those people. I need to know that they actually have skin in the game. If I did my politics on vibes, there are times when the vibes are off with my family where I'm frustrated at them. Do I leave them? There are times, I even mentioned one of them, where the vibes are seriously off with my church. Do I leave my church? Politics is what you cannot leave behind. Real politics is based on what you cannot leave behind. Do you care that your society is dying because it's having 0.8 children per woman? Well, then, your politics is to fix it, not to see that it's happening and then suddenly become part of the I'm on the team civilizational collapse. Girl power! That's not real politics. Real politics is what you cannot leave behind. And I want to know that first and foremost. And if you don't have that worked out, don't bother talking to real people about political issues. There's no point. Don't engage in futility. This is something I said about real or um, imagine political conflicts. No corpses. I misspelled that. You could tell I was going fast. So the famous line they say that America is a corpse being devoured by maggots. The right is rooting for the corpse. The left is rooting for the maggots. Whenever you're engaged in a political conversation, two things you should ask yourself. Are you on Team Corpse? Are you rooting for are you taking actions to pursue a political end that's never going to conceivably happen in the way you imagine it? If that's the case, you're on Team Corpse. Second question. Are you on Team Maggot? Are you seeing a cause that's winning, like the collapse of the family, and you say, because it's winning, I'm going to join Team Maggot? Don't join Team Corpse. Don't join Team Maggot. Politics is about life, not about joining the winning team or being part of a lost cause. If the cause is lost and you're not being commanded by God to throw yourself into the fire, which has only happened a few times in recorded human history, so it's almost certainly not happening, then you owe it to the people who rely on you to walk away from that political issue. Real politics is servant politics. In all politics, you are beholden to things that are above you and that are beyond your power to control. That's why we started with politics is based in the things that you cannot walk away from. I cannot walk away from my ethnicity. I cannot walk away from my family. I cannot walk away from my faith. Those are the things that I can't walk away from. And those are the basis of my politics. And in relationship to that, I am a servant. I am not a slave to a tyrant in that I do not obey commands that are irrational or nonsensical or degrading insofar as that they are against my values. And neither am I a narcissist that does this for my own vanity or my own feels or my own vibes. If you cannot conceptualize politics as a servant, And I say that believing that politics should essentially be executed by kings. If you cannot see yourself as a servant king, as an elf that's serving hobbits, then you are not doing real politics. You're not. You're either doing the politics of narcissism, of the elite human capital, the elves who hate hobbits, or you're doing feudal LARPing, where hobbits LARP as elves and then dedicate themselves to lost causes, which is not politics. This is where I want to get back to the new slang. The new slang is, I always felt that was an evocative song to have on the Shins album, but that's what we're trying to develop in these circles and in these conversations. A different way of talking about politics, a different way of disengaging with things that are going nowhere. And I'm doing that a lot these days. You know, if people have told I've done a lot of live streams, I'm going to do a lot more live streams. But you know, with the death in my family of my father, I, we we can't waste time on trivia. We actually have to start developing new ways of talking about things and new ways of doing things. Discourse is always going to be a reality. You know, the parting of ways we have with people like Hanania and James Lindsay are a part of that, certainly. But coming into our own way and developing a language that works for us and that can express our values is sort of the more important mode of doing things. That's really where the lost opportunity was with Matt Walsh's movie. Is you know, at least in Borat, Borat was a hateful movie, and it gave its audience a language of hate. Matt Walsh's movie was a more honest endeavor, but all it did was circle back to the same perspective we had on things when we started the movie. That there was more change that came over the viewer of Borat or Ali G uh, when they saw reasons to hate their fellow Americans than there was in Matt Walsh's movie, where he gives us the umpteenth recitation of Martin Luther King, which no one really believes anymore. Even conservatives don't believe in Martin Luther King anymore. They don't believe in this vision. And it needs to be called out as a false idol and torn down. You know, Matt Walsh is in possession of more powerful gods than Martin Luther King. So are all the people that go on endlessly about truth and reconciliation as Christian leaders. Why can't we hear a language and a new way of talking that centers that? And centers the politics that were there when it was a thing, when it was a true thing. We need a new language. We need a new perspective on politics. I'm writing an essay on new ways of interpreting literature and perspectives on our attitude towards books that I hope to get out on my Substack. In early October, the live streams are kind of cutting into my writing time a little bit. But a priority in all of this is also developing community. And although we haven't really solidified the details, part of what we're doing in all of our projects is going to be directed at mutual support and helping people that are suffering in these times. Maybe it's non-agentic men, the incels, giving them advice, giving them plans to actually uplift their lives. Most immediately, what we're talking about with the OGC is hosting a charity stream that we're going to be running, I think, on Wednesday. I believe I'll be hosting it on this channel. And we're going to be collecting money for the victims of the most recent hurricane that's happened, because several of the members of the OGC have been caught up in that disaster. And we want to become participants in the political relief efforts as part of the mission of mutual aid of fraternity. Real politics, more important in understanding of a language of politics, and this sort of an impatience with people like Hanania that are constantly, I really feel, trying to drag down the discourse, trying to freeze frame the internet in this in the very kind of mode you saw in Ali G and in Borat. Oh, look at these stupid people. Look at these rubes. Look at these guys who fell for the trick. Our language has to be much more than that. With that, guys, I'm going to go on to the super chats. No intermission today because I'm way, way, way over time. So let's go on to the super chats. Here we go. All right. So I decided that in lieu of our efforts to do the aid for Hurricane Helen, which is ironically enough my wife's name, half of the super chat donations all donate to the OGC's efforts tonight, which I'll post in the comment section after I get the totals for the super chats today. And we'll post that on the stream we do on, I think, this channel on Wednesday. Again, I haven't worked out the details, but thank you very much in advance. I realize this is the problem. I ruin my voice doing these super long lectures. Gray Smog for $5 USA. Does Rust belong in the Linux kernel? I have no idea what the Rust software is. About 20 years ago, I was poking around the Linux kernel when I was in college, but I haven't touched it since. So I'm afraid I am not a kernel hacker. You're going to have to get your advice on what to include in the kernel somewhere else. For those of you who are tuning into this, the Linux kernel is the source code for the base level of the Linux operating system, and sort of a rite of passage for a lot of Linux users is to recompile the source so that their system is running on a kernel that's been compiled with the processor that it is running on, which includes things that will spec to optimize your particular processor. Now, I think the utility of that has decreased in the age of modern processors, where there's a lot more uniformity of design. But in previous eras, that was a huge way to boost performance and to show that you could do a rather complex little operation on the command line and not completely blow up your system. Ben White for $3 USA. I like the Nighthawks painting you have for the cover of this video. The Blue Devils drum and the bugle corps did their marching show in 2018 based on this painting. I truly love the marching arts. Yeah, I mean, there is a certain amount of style that was in the jazz age and that still exists in jazz culture. I wouldn't wonder if that wouldn't become part of something that was more important culturally to how the right in particular saw itself. Because I think that all of these modes, all of these ways of thinking and acting that come from the jazz age are sort of fundamentally unrepeatable by people of a more progressive persuasion. Sort of coolness is an art that we've lost. And it's something that's fundamentally very, very difficult to appreciate in the internet age because it kind of requires a certain comfortableness with silence, which is obvious. I've never been cool, but I've always admired coolness from afar, I guess you could say. Son of Haster for $5 USA. Hello from New England. Haven't caught a stream in a while. Hope your move went smoothly. I like the song New Slang, and you can't change my mind. Well, I'm a huge fan of the Shins, Son of Haster. The the only insults I gave was to that horrible movie that made them popular, which was Garden State, which is kind of ironically the state that I just moved out of. Which um, I don't remember New Jersey having a significant number of gardens, but it's certainly not as many as British Columbia. British Columbia should, well, I guess it's not a state, should be called the Garden Province. But thank you very much. Gray Smog for $5. What is your favorite programming paradigm? Is object oriented programming trash? Well, yeah, I don't even, how relevant is this question? Because, you know, back in the day, you learned functional programming and they always taught it to you in Lisp. Lisp is this great little program that works around parentheses, and it's like this huge nested maze of recursive programming. And now we've gone from object oriented programming to a different kind of functional programming, which largely relies on classes and inheritance. And I think it's the better paradigm. What is the other one? There's logical programming, which is like Prolog, functional programming, which is like Lisp, object-oriented programming, which is like Java. Java is the ultimate object-oriented programming language. Everything is an object. And then when everyone saw how confusing object-oriented programming ultimately was, we went back to kind of a compromise that you see in a lot of modern Python code bases, which is to have everything organized into classes, but the classes are largely a way of organizing the functions. And the function-based programming, or kind of like the half object, half functions, is I think it's preferred because it's easier to test, right? And everything is based on tests these days for professional software. Eric Lafar for $5 USA. Just got done watching Miyazaki anime films. Despite him being a lefty and an ex-communist, I find there was something deeply reactionary about his repeated themes or traditionalism. Anime is more than just smut like Sailor Moon or Neon Genesis Evangelion. Yeah, that's you'll find right-wing themes in almost all anime. I would actually defend Neo Genesis Evangelion, which is kind of there's a lot of fan service in it, and it's rightly hated for a lot of reasons. And it has one of the more irritating fan communities. Cowboy Bebop is one of my favorite animes and one of the few ones that still holds up after all these years. It has sort of that jazz age cool that you don't get in many other places. But anime always has the most based forms. The problem and what makes people like me not trust it is that is it oftentimes gets the form right, and there are certain elements of its essence that seem poisonous. So for instance, there's this sort of implicit. Before my Substack got big, I wrote this essay called "Dante Won't Save the Zoomers, and Neither Will Anime," or "Anime Won't Save the Zoomers, and Neither Will Dante." The problem is that anime seems to implicitly teach a lot of people that form is essence. That if you can fake something, you can be it. So if you look like a Victorian, you have the qualities of the Victorian. So you'll see all of these people who are into Victorian anime. And what you get from people who are into Victorian anime in the 90s is you get steampunk in the late 2000s. And then you get transgenderism in the 2010s. And the lesson of the Victorians is to look at what's communicated in their outfits and to ask what spirituality led to that, so that you can wear modern fashions in a way that is equally as dignified. It's not to copy their specific outfits and then, live your completely disordered, amoral lifestyle in Portland, Oregon, where you have no family, you have no principles, you have no religion, You have no larger guiding moral purpose or mission in life, but you're wearing like a vest and a top hat and a monocle, and that's like the Victorians, and everyone thinks the Victorians were super serious and cool. Something about anime communicated that perspective, that form precedes essence. But that's fundamentally incorrect. Essence is the core of form, and form guides us to essence. Uh, it can never be divorced from essence, and I'm on my second read through of Sartor Resartus right now, and I really want to write a review. It's way back there, but I want to write it on just this topic: the dangers in the division of form and essence. Christopher Myers for $15 USA. Evening, Dave. Looking forward to your coming live streams. Update on my swing dancing group. A lot of the young dancers are busy with school, so things have slowed down, but we've made some connections with the social group that promotes the historic architecture in my city, who are fans of the swing era. This would be a great opportunity to get people from the local basket weaving group involved. I bet there is some fertile cross pollination that could be done. If you have people who are into based forms and you have people who are into based ideas, form and essence must constantly be trying to meet each other, like male and female. The second that form and essence pull against each other, they have fundamentally missed the point of what they are. Form should constantly try to be Form should constantly try to be looking for essence, and essence should constantly be looking to be fulfilled in form, like male and female. The second they pull against each other, they pull perversely. And the problem with our basket weaving groups oftentimes is they do not have a cause or a form to follow. This would be the perfect thing to meet up: a historical preservation that's also connected to a historical art form. But thank you for the update. Ben White for $3 USA. Although she went to Catholic school her whole life, she didn't know much church history. I did impress her with my knowledge. Wait, is this half of a tweet? It feels like I got half of it. Oh, I see Ben White previously there, but he's referring to some her. Um, Oh, I assume this is someone you're dating. I did impress this person with my knowledge about the Roman Empire, though. She texted me, "Tell me more about Rome." Well, that's promising. Look, guys, if a girl's attracted to you, she'll want you to mansplain. And actually, that's one of the things that kind of turned me on about my wife, is that I could tell her about things and she was really interested in them. And she genuinely laughed at my jokes, which is one of the reasons why I married her, a big reason. But thank you, Ben White, and I was eager to hear about your updates. Gray Smog for $7 USA. How did you develop your perspective? Even after all of these years, it feels so unique and so honest and so fresh after all of these years. I deeply admire how you think and want to come closer to it. Um, it's just reading, and so like, I don't know. It's just, none of my perspectives are original. They all come from like Goethe, and like I'm finishing up Goethe's Faust right now. So I've been thinking about, and Dante. So I think that insofar as that I have any skill, it's I take what I read and then I experience life, and like form and essence, I try to mash them together. And I try to do that as honestly as I possibly can, and that's where the ideas come from. I think that if more people did that, it would help. I think people are really afraid of saying, "I don't know," and they're afraid of mystery. And the thing with this thing is that because of that, they treat their ideology like it's it's this thing that has to be pristine and can't accept any contradictions. And you know, I know this is true. Whoa. Someone just gave me an enormous super chat that is bigger than anything I've ever received before. So we'll get to that. I will definitely be giving half of the proceeds of this thing to the relief efforts. Thank you very much. I hope there's not a zero there that's missing. Um, but I will definitely. I actually have to get the money before I donate it, so this is not coming into October. But yes, half of the stream will go to the OGC's efforts. But I think people's perspective on they get an ideology, they know it's true, they've been convinced about its spirit, but there's a certain fact in it that's like not sticking with them, and so what they do is they guard themselves against experiences that make this contradiction more apparent because they're afraid of losing that greater spirit that first drew them in. But in my opinion, you at least as I matured, I've learned to kind of walk into those contradictions a little more or be comfortable with them. And this actually makes your core spiritual understanding stronger. There are some facts that are true breakpoints, like the resurrection of Christ or the existence of God, which is, those can't be gotten around. But for most other things, you have to hold your ideologies loosely, and then kind of be open to them. Like you have to see Islam and go like, what is noble about this? What do people love about this? Even if I do think Muhammad was false in a very critical way, in some things I really admire what Thomas Carlyle does with his sort of love of the Prophet Muhammad. It's really weird being like this, former Presbyterian deist. Okay, Ben White Ben White for $3 USA. She did ask me to take her to a local renowned Chinese restaurant. To be honest, I can't see myself marrying her since our intellectual temperaments don't match. Should I still take her out to eat? Um, you want to make sure that as much as I put down vibe based politics, your relationships should be, to a certain extent, vibe based. If you're vibing intellectually, if you're vibing spiritually, you don't need a wife as a debate partner. You need a wife as a spiritual support. And if you're vibing together, that is what you should be going on. And then making sure that it all checks out rationally. E.g., she's not an enemy of a core moral belief you have, and that she's in the right space in her life for your plans to advance forward in marriage. But once you have core spiritual objectives, place in life, and once you have those two rational considerations taken care of, the vibes are where it's at. And that should be driving you forward in the dance, so to speak. Women are not wrong about that. They're wrong about taking that perspective to certain critical elements in politics, which is how you have fiascos like 2024 happen. Grace Mogg for $12 USA. What do you think of Bart Ehrman's ex-Christian, ex-atheist biblical scholar claim that the Pauline Gospels have a conflicting anti-Christian message with the rest of the Gospel? He claims that Christ was deeply pro-Mosaic law, and that because Paul denied the law, Paul was denying Christ. I mean, this is so stupid. It's all speculations on things that weren't said in the Gospel. Bart Ehrman feels more forced than a plain reading of the Gospels. There's no way you would come to that conclusion reading the Gospel of Mark. The Gospel of Mark feels like it's less embellished with Pauline ideals, but and as soon as you get to like Luke and Matthew, and especially John, John is very much. It's almost even more so transcendental than the letters of Paul. Bart Ehrman's thesis feels forced. It feels so forced. It feels like everyone's trying to come up with some core contradiction inside Christianity, and there's no real good way of reading the mainstay of Christian behavior anthropologically after that. There would And I guess I could see how he might advance the case that like Marcionism and Gnosticism were sort of reactions to this more Judaic. But I don't see does Bart Ehrman converted to Judaism? Like is he that thing? Does he believe his perspective enough to convert to Judaism, or does he not believe in God at all and wants all religions to be absorbed into the successor ideology? I'm ready to hear this argument from a Jew who accepts Jesus as the Messiah. I want to hear this argument from them and who's fluent in Greek. Then I will take it more seriously. Coming from Bart Ehrman or coming from a Jewish person who's loyal to Jesus's enemies, aka like the Talmudic sects, um, I'm kind of doubting it, especially since it goes against a plain reading of the text itself, at least when it's translated into English. Christian Ramirez for $3. I saw the Shins live. Great bands and stuff. Yeah, I saw them live twice. I saw them live once in Seattle when they were hot, and I felt that they were very unimpressive. Then when I saw them do an acoustic set for Prairie Home Companion, I thought they were really, really good. So I don't know. I think all bands are hit and miss. Like I saw the Pixies on their reunion tour, and I thought they were amazing. But then some like an older guy told me he saw them when they were kind of going out of style in '91, and he thought that they sucked. So oftentimes, I hear this too about like the Smashing Pumpkins. Most people who see them in the late '90s so they were one of the worst live bands of all time. But I have live recordings of the Pumpkins that are great from like 1992 and 1993 when they were just starting. So I think a lot about the live performances depends on when you catch these bands. When they're tired, they all suck. And when they're kind of just like chill or loose and the pressure is off and they can savor the music, sometimes they're amazing. Uh, Guelio for $5 USA. Hi, Dave. I work as a bouncer in Northwest Europe, and I have seen things in the last year that make me feel like a global war on terror veteran. Rapes, stabbings, shooting, disease, bombs, drugs, and general violence. These things are escalating so fast, my head is spinning. Well, I certainly sympathize. For so long, Europe has less crime than the United States. And now Europe is becoming like the United States in terms of its crime. And it's very, very tragic to see this place of civilization falling off. I mean, we need solidarity. The right wing needs to have solidarity across the Atlantic Ocean. There has to be some space in between people of different religious belief systems. So there'll be a division between Protestant and Catholic and Muslim and pagan. Although I think we can work together, and Talmudic Judaism too. Although I think we can all work together. I'm a big believer in multiculturalism. There also has to be divisions in between ethnicities. But I do not believe that there can be any division between the diasporas of a common faith. We all have to be working together and solving this problem, which will involve some measure of nationalism, even if nationalism is kind of not a long term solution, in my honest opinion. A transitional problem, so to speak. Thank you very much. A Shroidal Assassin for $5 USA. I feel like every day I get more cynical. I recently realized liberals only support Palestine, not because of the injustices that have been committed against them, but because they view the Palestinians as weak. Yes, unfortunately. Liberals believe Palestinians are the victimhood flavor of the month. They support you for the same reason they supported George Floyd and completely forgotten about him now. Look, Asteroidal Assassin, I'm not going to tell you that I have some deep empathy for the Palestinians. They're not my people. And in some sense, they're allied with political forces that have been enemies of mine in the past. But I want the best for the Palestinians, and they need to get into a relationship with some body of people that actually wants their well being as people and not to be used as pawns on a political chess game. And I don't trust Hezbollah or Iran for the same reasons. And I don't trust Israel either. I really sympathize with Palestinians as fellow people without a country that has their best interests. I feel that the death of Yasser Arafat was the worst thing that ever happened to the Palestinians because I think Yasser Arafat actually cared about them. And I don't think that any of their current patrons care about them other than the amount of money that they can wring out of them. Eric Lafarbe for $15 USA. Bart Ehrman is a hack. There is no evidence for the claims that he makes. It is a position that is sustained only because it is a message our elites want to promote. Without it, that collapses into contradictory heap it belongs. Its popularity is proof that no one is persuaded by logical arguments. And this is the problem, right? Because like every era, this is what G.K. Chesterton said. He got this reading Carlyle, right? And so Carlyle is obviously one of the major, like, you can tell that G.K. Chesterton got his writing style from Carlyle. G.K. Chesterton is much more readable than Carlyle, but you could tell he got his kind of way of thinking from Thomas Carlyle. But Thomas Carlyle was a deist, as you can tell from the fact that he so deeply admired Muhammad, when someone who was more specific about his belief in God would consider Muhammad's legacy to be indivorceable from his religious errors. Uh, but but G.K. Chesterton says this. He says, I loved Carlyle, and he took me to sort of a vague atheism. But then Carlyle went out of fashion, and in the early 20th century, they went from kind of like a manly atheism to sort of a more pacifist atheism. And so, like, these sort of anti-Orthodox Christian things, they go in fads, right? One time, Bart Ehrman thinks that Christianity is fundamentally Jewish, but I know a previous generation of ex-evangelical atheists who believe that Christianity was fundamentally anti-Jewish and that Jesus was essentially trying to introduce Platonism into the mix, and that attempts to Judaism him were a later addition, an attempt to integrate a fundamentally anti-Jewish religion into a Jewish sect. And so like these ideas, like they come and go. Every heresy that's popular in the academy is met by a heresy in the opposite direction that occurs 20 years after. The only thing that's consistent about their relationship to these things is they're consistently against the Orthodox vision. So 100% agree with you there. Ben Fleming for $3 USA. For those of you who don't live in Canada, here is the unabridged story about what happened to the residential schools. The First Nations children received an education. Well, yes, Ben Fleming, that they did. And it was certainly sponsored by the government of Canada at the time, from my understanding. There certainly could have been abuses, although I'm not immediately aware of them. And yes, thank you. Thank you. That is true. Asteroidal for Assassin for $3 USA. I mean, JD Vance is, well, he's doing cross-dressing and wearing that makeup. Sorry, unbased. You can do lines of crack, but cross-dressing is where I draw the line. And we're talking about his eyeliner or that one jokey. I mean, there's pictures of me cross-dressing in high school. I did it as a lark. It was like, it's what people did. Kurt Cobain did it. It was like you have a mustache and you have like a moo on. That's funny. That's not like subversive. And the whole eyeliner, I don't know, man. The Cure was doing that in '86. It's just a thing. Like, people need to get over themselves. Come on, guys. Novum for $20 USA. Immigrants have pressed me before on my honest opinion of them migrating to the US. I told them if they don't mind their descendants abandoning all of their original cultural values, donning blue hair, and gaining 100 pounds within 2 generations, then that's the price they pay. The fools think their bloodline is immune. Yeah, they're 100% right there. There's sort of a Muslim group on Substack that's saying like, oh wow, Muslims have the answer, and I'm like, have you even seen Muslims in the modern West? Like, they've adopted all of the most degenerate norms of Christian culture the second they come into contact with the consumer culture here. It's absolutely nuts. Asteroidal Assassin for $3 USA. Dave, when you go to Toronto, if you spot a tall, half-black white girl named Sarah, tell her I said hi. She's the eccentric right-wing black girl I spoke about. You can't miss her. Well, I certainly will say hi. It will be weird for me to call her Sarah if I haven't been introduced. But I'm hoping to see Toronto, and yeah, it's going to be a plane ticket. Ugh, I hate buying plane tickets. I'm buying so many of them these days for work and personal stuff. But yeah, that is the thing. Sam153 for $20 USA. Evening, Dave. In my opinion, this Orange Shirt Day is about building a new false myth in Canadian culture. Normies will go along with it because the day is off. Kids will grow up with a corrupted tradition, more power secured from the usual suspects. Yeah, but we should do what the Columbus people do. We should create our own holiday on this day that celebrates some traditional, like we should call it Captain Cook Day or something like that, right? Oh, or like Pioneer Day, and or some other make it non-combative. Maybe emphasize like North American, weren't the North American martyrs Canadian? Weren't the North American martyrs Canadian? Those priests that went to Quebec and got tortured to death by like the Algonquin or something like that. Like put a day here that allows us to celebrate the day off differently than they do. That's the right way to approach this. Asteroidal Assassin for $3 USA. Dave, you don't understand. The elite human capital are clearly the ones posting about little anime girl feet on Twitter. Well, maybe. I haven't seen Hanania's most recent posts, but you could be right. Asteroidal Assassin again. Once again about right wing women. They need to understand that if they don't marry before I get rich or become a badass war hero, they are banished from the right wing spaces eternally. Well, maybe. Well, good luck. Apparently, our friend Good Tweetman has finally found love. He was one of the really based perennial lonely hearts, but he was a really great guy, so I'm not surprised that he finally found somebody. So that's really good news. I think that if we play a long enough game, a lot of the guys in this sphere will be able to escape from the problem of singledom. Nerve AMV Maker for $10 USA. One of the biggest boomer myths is that the elite island immigrants is that the Ellis Island immigrants assimilated. This didn't happen. What happened to California in the 80s and 90s happened to New England in the 30s. These states flipped Dem and voted FDR, not because of WASPs, because the WASP population fell from 85% in 1960 to 20% in 1930. Yeah, I mean this is the problem, right? The Ellis immigrants came in. Uh, they forced the culture to be multicultural, and because of that, the WASP culture turned into shitlibbery because shitlibbery is the only thing that could moralistically fit in the space of New England Puritanism of yesteryear. That is 100% what happened in California, and that's 100% what happened. I take your word, and that's what happened in New England. But thank you, Anna Van V Maker. I'm hurrying because my voice is running out. You're going to be on a 12-hour flight. You can either sit next to Matt McManus or ContraPoints. Death isn't an option. Who are you picking? Well, obviously ContraPoints, because I haven't talked to ContraPoints in a really long time, and I'm genuinely curious what their thoughts are. I know what Matt McManus thinks. There's no thought Matt McManus has that I have not anticipated. That's why I love replying to him on Twitter, because I know what his response is going to be, because it would have been mine when I was a progressive. Matt McManus does not understand me. And that's why I anticipate all of his responses. I know what his responses are going to be. I guess that's what makes him fun to troll. ContraPoints is a mystery to me. I mean, I kind of get it. ContraPoints is similar to a lot of people that I grew up with in the more artsy sphere, in the more, I'm an elite, brave millennial artist and also very, very attractive. These people are all over Berkeley in the early 2000s, trying to recreate the spirit that was there in the 1990s. But at the same point, I kind of wonder about ContraPoints. I wonder a few specific things. I wonder if they regret where they are right now. Because ContraPoints, I think they wanted to transition in the 1990s. I think they wanted to transition in the 1990s. Because in the 1990s, transitioning was a heroic thing. Almost nobody did it. And if you did it, you had to break radically from your past. Now, transgenderism is a fad. It's celebrated by the most boring milquetoast bourgeoisie people. And ContraPoints has had so many people follow them into this lifestyle that are obviously, to not put a too fine point on it, cringe. It can't feel the same way as it did in the 1990s. It can't. And Yeah, but thank you very much. I would want to ask them about that. If I could sincerely ask how they were feeling about the left these days, what they wanted to see come from it. Owen Zelensky. Hello, Dave. I'm glad to hear that you've been involved with the art show in California. It's a bit far out for me, but I'm working with Matt of Pole to get my pieces featured on the show. Also, I just finished a commission for a book over a book cover thanks to basque weaving. Many more projects to come. So this is exactly what basque weaving is for. It's to meet up with people so you can share your projects together. And, I haven't really kind of settled in here. I haven't even decided where our parish is yet, whether it's in Victoria or some other place. So I haven't been doing a lot of weaving here, and it will probably won't be doing a lot of weaving until the beginning of 2025 because I'm constantly going off to other family events or to these other events that are in Toronto or Portland or wherever. So, but I intend to try to start that up here when I can. Thank you so much, Owen Zelensky. I want to hear those pieces of good news. They're very good to hear. Asteroidal Assassin for $10 USA. You're going to be stuck in a forest for 1 month. The the both have the both have been given basic survival training, and both of you have to survive at the end, or else you won't receive $1 million. What would you have to pick, Keffals or Thought Slime? Which do you pick? Oh, easily Thought Slime. Keffals is 100% a psycho. Thought Slime is just your average millennial. As long as Thought Slime didn't know I was a right winger, they would be 100. They would be absolutely cooperative. Now, Thought Slime is 100, and also Thought Slime is a joiner. Thought Slime joins trends. He does not oppose them. He hops on bandwagons, and then everything about his personality is designed to be inoffensive in that. Keffels is a drama starter. They want to be in the center of drama, and they will burn down everything you have built as long as they can be vindicated that they were on the right side of things. 100% Thought Slime, team player. Thought Slime, again, one of those people who, if the right wing were ever to permanently win, they would be swearing up and down that they were racist and always had been racist, as in the famous words of Zero HP Lovecraft. Nerve AMV Maker for $10 USA. My favorite part of the Hanania's definition of elite human capital is that somehow Pete Buttigieg is elite human capital, but Elon Musk is just a chud. Remember when libertarians held entrepreneurs and innovators in higher esteem than midwit bureaucrats? Maybe they should reread Ayn Rand. I mean, yeah, come on, dude. I forgot about that. Yeah, Pete Buttigieg is elite human capital, and Elon Musk is a Dale Gribble type. He's just an idiotic red stater. Nerve AMV Maker. On being better read than Hanania, Hanania did post the other day on how he tries to de-radicalize people by getting them to read Hayek. I'm pretty sure every chud read all of Hayek back in 2008. Yet who has not read the Road to Serfdom? It's like the most read book on the right wing. Nobody is. This is just 100% pure performance that you're getting from Hanania in this stage, Nerve V Maker. I mean, he's telling. It's like Faraday. Remember Faraday speaks? Like, I'm de-radicalizing people by, I don't know, talking to them about neoconservatism and Nick Land. Nobody is de-radicalized by Hayek, because Hayek gets you to ask questions that he does not have answers for and that only exist inside political realism, which immediately refocus you on things that are very politically incorrect. Nervy and V Maker, at least transgenderism is an ethos. Nice big Lebowski reference there. I love that movie. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to hurry though because I'm running out of voice. Jimmy for $3. Possibly a better phrase than effeminate politics is puerile politics. The alliteration is just alluring. See you in Oregon. Well, thanks to me, Jimmy. I will see you in Oregon, absolutely. Asteroidal Assassin for $10 USA. I'm not sure if I've made the we're winning argument with trying to convert you, but Islam, specifically Shia Islam, is pretty well defined by martyrdom. If that means anything, I'm a Muslim because I know we're right. Okay, that's the right reason to be Muslim. Even if the lives are lost in Gaza and America having nuclear weapons, I'm still one. Well, thank you. That is a respectable reason to be Muslim. Do not be a Muslim because you're on the winning side. Be a Muslim because you think that that is what God's side is. I can assure you Muslims have done a lot of losing, but you probably don't need me to explain that to you with the headlines that came out this morning. Glow in the dark for $3 USA. As a Christian, we shouldn't despair if our culture is a corpse, for we have someone who conquered death. If successfully revived, it can be a brand new, better beginning. Yes, um, absolutely. But I worship the living Christ, not the dead Christ. And I have no desire to worship a dead temporal thing. So I will 100% worship Christ who has died and now lives, but I'm not worshiping the dead body of John Locke. I'm sorry, I'm not doing that. I'm not worshiping the dead body of Thomas Jefferson or the dead body of George Washington or the dead body of Abraham Lincoln. Those people are humans. They are only good insofar as they communicate a higher purpose. But thank you. Well taken. Silly Cat says, thanks for the stream. Keep them coming. I will definitely do that. I'm going to try to get it 2 out per month. Charlie, good evening. I hope you're doing well. Since you went and mentioned Shakespeare's Henry V, do you have a favorite film adaptation of any Shakespeare's work? Well, I mean, people who know me from last year, I did Last Things Film Festival. I did Titus Andronicus, which is the Judy Taymor 1999 rendition. I love that movie. I absolutely love that movie. I mean, Shakespeare doesn't always translate well into film. All of the Kenneth Branagh ones are pretty passable. And there were some from the 2000s. There was a really wacky Midsummer's Night Dream from the 2000s. Um, I don't know. My question is, why haven't there been more Shakespeare renditions? I found early Shakespeare renditions also to be not very good, like the ones from the early Hollywood. I feel like they don't take their time. They kind of run through it. Laurence Olivier's Henry V is actually worse than, and Laurence Olivier is a better actor than Kenneth Branagh, but I don't feel like he takes the time for the St. Crispin's Day speech that Kenneth Branagh does. Dreadnought for $50 USA. Dave, this is a great stream. I don't have any questions about that, so I have to be frivolous. You owe me a $50 you owe me $50. What do you think of the mechanicus of the 40K, of their ideology and belief? And what weapon would you want to wield in 40K? Go wild and elucidate. Have fun with your answer. Well, I mean, I respect that the Mechanicum are religious, but the problem is that they say that the flesh is weak, the machine is weak. The machine is fundamentally not alive, and life has a quality to it that machines cannot replicate. And so I think that fundamentally the Mechanicum religion is a contradiction of itself, since whatever good it has, uh, whatever good it's maintained, it's realized that machines need flesh as much as flesh, or more so, I would even argue, than flesh needs machines. And the Mechanicus also only makes sense if it prohibits pure AI, which is, rightly viewed as sort of an abomination. What weapon would I want to wield? I mean, they're all so horrific. The best weapon on the tabletop, and I don't play 40K. I play Kill Team occasionally because it's a nice little tight game, and I absolutely love all those small little games. Like I have a friend who's really into Blood Bowl right now, and it's just an absolute blast. He's actually convinced me to paint a team, and I haven't done that for a while. But it's just absolutely nuts. But in the 40K universe, my go-to gun on the tabletop is plasma. It's just fun to blow up or blow somebody else up and have that that crisis that occurs on one. There was an excellent Substack article that came out today on the nature of wargaming and how, in order to fix the culture of wargaming, we need to go back to the whole Prussian understanding of it as Kriegspiel and not as a game like chess. I cannot recommend that article enough. And in order for the spirit of 40K to be true, it has to be true to its wargaming roots. That's the only way it makes any sense at all. That's the only way it makes sense. And yes, I'm going on like 4 hours now. Dreadnought for $5 USA. Why do you think anima led to this divorce of form from essence? I was never a big anime fan, but I love Cowboy Bebop, and I felt that it was a fundamentally right wing work. Well, I mean, it is. I mean, Cowboy Bebop is a Western, and Western is in essence right wing. And look, the divorcing of form from essence is a product, I believe, of the Enlightenment. And this is going to be the substance of my Sartor Resartus review if I ever get around to writing it, ahead of the current essay that I'm writing and the 3 speeches that I'm writing and all the other things that I'm working on. And believe me, these live streams aren't helping with this process. Um, the what makes anime particular, my theory about what makes anime um, vulnerable to the separation and opposition of essence and form is that most of the time the Japanese are copying these concepts from cultures they don't really understand. So they Japanese 100% understand the form of Tolkien. They do not understand the essence of Tolkien very well, and you can see them struggle to superimpose this in animes like Record of the Lotus War. And I assume that something similar is going to be happen to modern fantasies. And they understand very well the look of Victorian Europe, and they really do try. I think Miyazaki does really try to capture part of the magic of the late 19th century, early 20th century. But there's always a disconnect, and that disconnect feeds into the modern desire to fully separate form from essence, so that because we've recreated the form in simulation, we naturally must have the essence. That is the fundamental lie of the modern world and the modern simulacra based world. Chai's, okay, this is the ultra super chat for $500. Oh my God. So once more, half of this is going to go to charity. I said half. You understand that of the total, 250 is going to go to the Old Glory Club's efforts at hurricane relief. Other than that, I will refund you the money if you mistyped the zeros here. So thank you very much. Thanks. I needed this stream in a way that's difficult to describe. My guardian angel must be whispering video ideas in your ear. I won't be able to make the hurricane release stream, so I'm donating to the cause here. Okay, how about this? I will give all of that $500 to the hurricane relief. So I will deduct all of this $500, and then half of the remainder of the $500 will go to the hurricane relief in my name, and this $500 will go all to the hurricane relief in your name. Thanks so much, Chai Squared. I appreciate it. Dreadnought for $3. Okay, after saying this guy get 500, I feel like saying you owe me. I want to have some fun. God bless Yarp. Thank you very much. And you're exhausting my voice. Ben White for $3. Ever since I've gone over to move, I've gotten this obsession about the creases in my dress shirts and pants. The drying machine really does a number. How much ironing do you do to kill the evil creases? I don't do ironing. I haven't done ironing since I went into graduate school for my PhD. My wife does ironing. She did ironing for a embassy, and they had her iron everything. They had her iron like the napkins on the table. They had her iron underwear. It goes overboard. I am a believer in non-ironing. Do you think I iron? Well, I guess my wife ironed this shirt. This shirt is like I work remotely, but I try to every other day wear a suit to kind of get into the spirit of work. And indeed, I'm not an ironer. I'm sorry. I'm gonna plead. I'm gonna plead the trad on that one. My wife will answer that one. Glow in the dark for $3 USA just meant resurrection is possible for our culture. Lazarus, after being resurrected, did not fear death and cannot be turned from the way. Well, very well. Yeah, I hope for a resurrection of our culture too. Glow in the dark. Thank you. Owen Zelensky for $3. Fuck. It's Zelensky, not Zelensky. There is no N. I'm sending a super chat to make sure you don't forget. Okay, thank you. I always say Zaleski. Owen Zaleski for $3. Anyway, the book is How to Raise a State by Antonio de Oliveira Salazar, if you want to check it out. Thank you. I'll try to put that on my list. Owen Zaleski. Thank you very much. Um, Charlie Maki for $10 USA. With what you said about the Mechanicus in 40K, what do you think about the Necrons? Well, I mean, the tragic kingdom of the dead is one that always draws me. I mean, that's kind of the converse of the Necrons, right? Is that the Necrons have lost their humanity to technology, or they were never human, but they lost their life to a dead object. I mean, I fundamentally the problem with the Necrons with this question, Charlie, is I fundamentally disagree with the direction that the creators have took the Necrons in the sort of post-Primaris age. I fundamentally disagree with all the directions that the creators of 40K took the setting. The Necrons should be mysterious, undead objects that have traded their souls to technology and to the Khitan gods. It should not be clear exactly what their motivations are, or whether they're acting out a program, or whether they actually have plans. It should not be clear whether they control the Khitan gods or the Khitan gods control them. They should be a huge mystery. The only thing that should be clear is that they kill all life and that they're totally soulless and totally dead. They're better as a mystery. And like now 40K has Necrons that actually have personalities that talk to each other. This fundamentally indicates that the creators have no idea what the point of this the setting is. So thank you very much. Dreadnought for $5 USA. Okay, you really need to do a video about anime versus essence. You really need to do it and put as a footnote a marker, because most people, including me, don't get it. God bless you. Well, thank you. I'm going to try to incorporate it into the Sartor Resartus thing. Dreadnought for $5 USA. Okay, dude, you really need to do a video on anime versus essence. You really need to do it. Didn't I just answer this one? Okay, this one. Okay, Dreadnought for $5 USA. Okay, we want a whole stream on 40K. Why won't you give it to us? I'll do the next one in 40K. Why not? I'll do the next one on wargaming. Well, I can't quite be the thing, right? Because right now I'm really enjoying a war game that is not, well, it's not, it's a kind of more of a board game. I played Blood Bowl the other weekend with a friend and I had an absolute blast. And every time I play one of these board games that comes from Games Workshop that they don't care about, it's always super fun. And every time I play one of the Games Workshop games that's like one of their board games, it always is the worst gaming experience of my entire life. So maybe I'll do the next one on 40K. Actually, that might be a good charity stream. Okay, guys, I'm finally through the super chats. Now on to the Psalm. And my voice is, I'll read Psalm 13. I don't know why. I felt like it. This is to finish out the night. I will put it as a chat, I guess. Well, I'll just read it. Psalm 13 for the director of music, a psalm of David. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle my thoughts and day after day have some sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. And my enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. Thank you very much, fellow or I should say listeners, not fellow, because I am not listening. I wish you a wonderful rest of the week. I will see you hopefully on Wednesday for our charity stream. I don't know whose channel it is on. It's a high probability that it will be mine because I have one of the bigger ones. And I will invite friends on and hopefully we will generate money from charity. And hopefully I can redirect you. There will not be an entropy chat there. It'll be a different chat system, so you will not be giving money directly to me. Instead, I will take half of this chat's revenue after I deduct the $500 and post it to that location when it comes up. In the meantime, I will see you in a day or two. Have a wonderful week and have a blessed evening. Good night.